So the Chancellor, the new Chancellor, oh, excuse me, it's been early, isn't it? Anyway, he's admitted the government went too far and too fast with the mini-budget plans to grow the economy.
Well, in a statement released last night, Jeremy Hunt admitted that it won't be an easy road ahead, but maintained his focus that the growth will be underpinned by stability.
But he also suggested tax rises could form part of a painful fiscal package designed to restore market confidence in the UK.
Well, meanwhile, the Bank of England has warned of higher interest rates than expected next month in a bid to tackle inflation.
Well, the Governor, Andrew Bailey, says a stronger response may be needed than originally forecast.
Well, for more reactions, let's speak to political commentator Peter Spencer. Good morning to you, Peter. So what do you make, then, of Jeremy Hunt's stance on this? It's all rather embarrassing for Liz Truss, isn't it?
Well, I think it's a bit more than embarrassing. I mean, what she's done is just disappeared down a great big, deep hole, because trace back through the summer, she was saying and selling to the Tory party membership, listen, you're going to love this jam today. And they said, yes, please, yeah, you can be our leader. Rishi Sunak, by contrast, was saying, look, this is fairy tale economics, it won't work. Liz Truss has now appointed as her Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, who was the prominent Sunak backer. So what she's done, in effect, is get her whole concept of how the economy should go forward, ripped it up and chucked it in the bin and handed it over to Jeremy Hunt. And what we're looking at now is sort of reminiscent of what a former Tory Chancellor, Norman Lamont, said back in the 90s in his resignation speech. We give the impression of being in office, but not in power. That is precisely where Liz Truss is now. It's not surprising that her press conference on Friday was very short, because how long does it take to say goodbye?
Well, honestly, Peter, it seems the most remarkable situation that, as you say, she won on a tax-cutting agenda. They came in with a tax-cutting budget, and now it seems taxes may go up. I mean, that isn't going to keep anybody happy, least of all, as you're suggesting, the Tory backbenchers who actually want a change at the top already.
Indeed so. Well, you say it won't keep anybody happy. It is interesting to note that Jeremy Hunt has had a little chat with the Governor of the Bank of England, and his words, we had a meeting of minds. In other words, they're back in sync. And when we have this mini-budget fiscal statement, call it what you will, at the end of the month from Jeremy Hunt, it will look very, very much like what Sunak had in mind in the first place. And the reality is that I think if whether or not Liz Truss is still leader by then, and that still remains a question, they will suck it up, because they will have the impression, as hopefully the markets will have decided by then as well, that there's a grown-up driving the truck instead of a kid.
There is speculation in the papers that have been on the last few days that MPs are already ganging up on Liz Truss, looking at her replacements. We were speaking about a twin ticket yesterday of Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt. Today, front page of the Mirror, the Tories want Big Ben Wallace for PM. How much truth do you think is behind that? Are people already considering replacements?
Yes, indeed. I mean, what is happening over this weekend is phones are buzzing like crazy and everyone is talking conspiracy. I suspect what's also happening is that you've got these Tory MPs who, remember, until just a few days ago were saddled with Liz Truss, and suddenly, effectively, they aren't. And they probably just struggling to actually take it in. Having got over that hurdle, then the next question is, right, well, what do we do about it? And normally there's a bit of a run-up when people work out sort of their battle lines and so on. But in this case, it's just come at them like that. And all sorts of options, I'm sure, are being considered. But, in extremis, they sort of have a choice, whether, at least many of them will judge this to be the case, that a choice between looking completely ridiculous for a time while they're in the business of disposing of Liz Truss, or potentially looking like the contents of a coffin until the next election, when, of course, they get interred.
Can they actually change leader, Peter, by hook or by crook, without that then, within a pretty short period of time, resulting in the general election?
Well, I mean, the reality is Liz Truss is technically protected from a leadership challenge for a year. It has to be said that so was Boris Johnson, and look what happened to him. And the rules of the 1922 Committee of Tory backbench MPs are that if there appears to be, to use their phrase, a groundswell of support for a change in leadership, then basically they've been the rules, in just the same way as Jeremy Hunt is actually spinning Kwasi Kwarteng's mini budget and its contents. And I mean, you know, in the case of Boris Johnson, after cabinet resigning was a pretty clear hint that there was a groundswell of support for getting rid of him. And if you got not a few dozen, but a few score Tory MPs, for example, putting in letters of expressing no confidence in Liz Truss, that will be judged enough. And at that point, the executive committee of the 1922 committee, the so-called men in grey suits, could go up to Downing Street and say, look, sorry, love, but pop it.
OK. Peter, for now, thanks very much indeed. Oh, what do you make of it all? I mean, really, what do you make of it all? I mean, it's whether you think it's, you know, sort of terrible sort of backstabbing and all the sort of, you know, smoky dark rooms where all this stuff's being discussed and all the rest of it, and very sneaky. Well, perhaps it is. But also, we are in a state where, I mean, what is actually happening in government at the moment? I mean, whether you're a Tory voter or not in all of this just is crazy, isn't it?
It seems like a mess, doesn't it?
It really does seem like a mess, you know, and you may be the most... And a lot of you get in touch and say, you know, you've voted Tory all your life, but no more, at least not while this is going on. I mean, I think that's the problem they're going to face.
And a lot of people saying, you know, they'd rather see a Labour government now, whilst the Tories sort themselves out, because they can't bear another day of these kind of headlines, where it just feels like it's anarchy in number 10, and what we're looking for, what people say they're looking for, is stability. So really, really difficult. Do let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be talking about this all morning, won't we?
We will. I'm afraid we will.
Unfortunately, sorry.
It is 9 minutes past 9. Let's bring up to date with some of the other headlines. And the government is pressing ahead with legal measures to keep Britain moving during strike action. The legislation will introduce minimum service levels when transport workers take industrial action. Unions, of course, criticise the move, many saying it could be unworkable.
Suella Braverman has unveiled plans for a major crackdown on climate protesters. The Home Secretary says it will give police new powers to take a more proactive approach to protests, with some of the measures specifically targeted at the tactics used by some environmental groups.
And Queen Camilla has been pictured surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of Paddington bears and some other teddies. They've been left by members of the public outside Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle after Queen Elizabeth passed away. The palace says the toys have been cleaned and will now be delivered to Bernardo's Children's Services in the coming weeks.
I love that. It's a little bit of joy, isn't it? That the
It's
Paddington
nice.
Bears are going to children in need. That's nice.
Yeah, I think that is a very nice and very nice gesture. And I was glad they've been cleaned.
Yeah, me too. Some of them were sat outside Windsor Castle for many days.
So-
I can tell you that.
They're fresh now.
Yeah, they're fresh now. But children were actually leaving their actual teddy bears that belonged
were
to
they?
them. Yeah. There was one, and it will stay with me. It was from a boy called Tommy, and he literally left his teddy bear, and he wrote a note saying, "Please look after my bear."
Oh,
How lovely, though, that they just
sweet.
connected the Queen with their teddy bears. Really lovely. Very nice. Bit of joy in the morning, that's what we need.
Yes, well, will we have joy when it comes to transport? Well, not if you believe the unions. I don't know if it's going to work or not. As more rail strikes get underway, the government has announced that from next year, minimum service levels will be imposed to avoid a complete shutdown of transport links.
Well, ministers will introduce a bill in Parliament as early as this week to ensure a certain number of trains, tubes or buses continue to run even during industrial action.
Can you really do that, though? Let's talk to our very favourite travel expert, Simon Calder, who's here. Morning to you.
Morning.
Well, look, The unions say it's unworkable. Is it?
Well, that all depends. Now, there will be a lot of people watching this morning who think, yep, I'm absolutely cheesed off with the rail strikes. We've had, really, since the start of June, the worst industrial action on the railways since the 1980s. And the idea is, and this was one of Liz Truss's promises, that if you stipulate a minimum level of service, whether that's one train in 5 or 2 trains in 5, then that is actually going to allow people to get to work, get to hospital appointments, get to see relatives, etc. And they say in Spain, in France, you already have similar legislation in transport. Let me tell you how that works. So air traffic controls in France happen generally every fortnight through the summer. And during those, there will be a minimum level of service agreed. Well, when I say agreed, it imposed, and effectively the government says to the union, you've got to make sure you've got this many men and women in place, and the union effectively kind of grumbles and does that. Similarly, in Spain, when you've had strikes by cabin crew, they will sometimes be told, and I've been on a flight like this, you've got to fly, but that's all you do. You just look after the safety. You're not going to be selling tea and sandwiches and so on. So it sort of works, but the union response is so furious that they say effectively this is ripping up workers' rights to strike. That even the General Secretary of ASLEF, the Train Drivers Union, said, well, if you do that, you'll just find that you've got quite a lot of drivers phoning up sick. And it simply won't happen. So one of those things where I fear the effect could actually be, instead of solving the deepest rail dispute in 40 years, we're going to see actually the two sides further apart and even more action. And just to remind people, even though there's no Great Britain-wide strikes around at the moment, we have got a few cancellations tonight on East Midlands Railways because there's 2 days of strikes coming up there, then future strikes by train managers at Avanti West Coast, and a day's strike on the 29th of October in ScotRail. So a lot more coming up. And of course, the main rail unions say we're no closer a settlement. And so I fear there will be further disruption there too.
I mean, so the unions obviously aren't very happy, but this is good news, isn't it, for passengers to have a minimum service. Like you say, it does mean that you can get around, get your hospital appointments, get to see family. After a summer of strikes, is what many people will be happy to hear.
Really good point, absolutely. But is it going to work? Now, during the strikes, even when we've had, so this is the first weekend actually with no strikes at all, but even last week when there was a national RMT strike, you still got about 1 train in 5 running, which is sort of what they're looking for.
Is that just people deciding not to strike of their own accord? It's
a combination of managers who are obviously able to work, but there aren't many of them. For instance, I got a train to Bristol driven by somebody who trains the train drivers, and people who don't belong to the union, or people, I guess, who there will be some who just think cost of living crisis, I cannot afford to lose a day's pay. So you can get a service running. And the thing is, if you say, right, we're going to run 40% of trains, who decides which ones those are, and who decides who's allowed to go on them? Because they're all going to fill up. Because we've got the policy here in the UK is if there's a space for you to stand up in a train, you can get on that train. So there's lots of problems associated with it. And as you were saying, it's not going to come until next year anyway, if it gets through a very divided Parliament. And it will be interesting to see how it does work and whether you can actually do this. We've seen really dramatic industrial relations legislation with unions having to give 2 weeks' notice of strikes, which has really transformed how things have been happening. So we shall see.
We shall. Simon, thank you very much indeed. What do you make of it then? Or, on the surface it sounds good. But even if you at any point support the ability for unions to take action, it dilutes the action they can take, the impact they can have. Maybe we need to dilute it. I don't know. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Well, many people would say over the summer of strikes, they would say it needs diluting, but it does take away the power of the unions, doesn't it? I mean, they want to cause as much disruption as possible. And now, if there's a minimum service level, you're not causing as much disruption, are you? But like Simon says, that could make things worse. Complex.
Oh,
certainly complex. Do let us know what you think.
Something simple this morning. I'll tell you what might be simple. Sport showbiz, which is all coming up in just a second. Plus, we'll keep you up to date with all the headlines.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking blustery, with showers becoming confined to the far north. Elsewhere, mostly dry. Let's take a look at the details.
Well, across the south and west, dry, plenty of sunshine this morning, although some cloud will spread across the region later.
A dry start across the south and east with plenty of sunshine. However, cloud will move across the region from the south during the morning.
Now, it's going to be a fine and dry start with a fair amount of sunshine during the morning in Wales. Cloud, though, will increase from the south by late morning.
The Midlands will be fine and dry with prolonged sunny spells for all during the morning. However, cloudier skies will spread northwards from late morning. Winds mostly light but becoming slightly breezier into the afternoon.
To the northeast of England, then, it's going to be dry with prolonged sunny spells. Slightly cloudier in the far west with some patchy rain around. Winds mostly light, but they will increase.
Rather windy with showers continuing to affect the north and west of Scotland during the morning, but those easing somewhere into the afternoon. Elsewhere, dry with decent sunny spells.
For Northern Ireland, dry. Lots of sunshine at first, but skies will turn hazy from mid-morning. Outbreaks of cloud and rain arriving during the afternoon.
Cloud and rain accompanied with strong winds will spread north and east during the afternoon and evening, and that is how your weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
.20 morning to you, watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
Now, every 5 minutes, someone in the UK will have a stroke. And a new mum who suffered a rare stroke 5 weeks after giving birth wants to raise awareness of how pregnant women and new mothers can be affected.
Well, the 28-year-old from Buckinghamshire had to learn to walk and talk again after a cerebral venous thrombosis. Alice Porter has the story.
I mean, in that moment, essentially, I thought I was going to die.
Alice was just getting used to her life with a 5-week-old baby when the symptoms of a stroke suddenly began.
I sort of struggled to get out of bed, to get to the bathroom, and in the end my husband had to kind of carry me down the stairs. Could, by this point, not move my right arm above sort of my head.
Hello, space station. In hospital, Alice was diagnosed with a cerebral venous thrombosis, a rare condition which often causes stroke-like symptoms. Partially paralysed, she also suffered 2 seizures. She began her recovery on a stroke ward, the youngest person by decades.
I was completely bedbound, was unable to kind of go to the toilet, to eat, to feed myself, to sit up. Obviously wasn't able to breastfeed, couldn't pump myself either, so I was having to explain to the nurses while struggling with language and speech a lot. And I think being a young mum, I just felt that he wouldn't see me grow up, he wouldn't know me, and kind of thought a lot about the impact that would have on like my husband. So yeah, I guess that was really difficult.
1 in 1,000 women will have a blood clot during pregnancy or in the 6 weeks after giving birth. Consequently, pregnancy and childbirth increase women's risk of a stroke. Professor Beverly Hunt is Medical Director of Thrombosis UK.
Their blood gets more sticky, and it starts very early on, soon after conception. And the time when the blood is stickiest is the 6 weeks after giving birth. A lot of women who die in pregnancy are dying from pulmonary emboli. So it's an ongoing problem, and obstetricians and haematologists are very aware of this and will give women at high risk small doses of blood thinners to take.
As she continues to recover, Alice uses social media to raise awareness of the dangers of blood clots so that more families can spot the potentially fatal signs.
Not everybody will have seizures, not everybody will lose sort of motion and have that stroke element. So sometimes I've heard other people's stories around people just being dismissed as a migraine, but sort of knowing this and just really pushing and making sure, I think is invaluable.
Alice Porter, GB News.
Oh, it's shocking. I mean, honestly, those strokes and those mini strokes, it was to be younger people getting them all the time.
Imagine 5 weeks after birth as well. Awful.
Yeah.
Really bad.
Look, loads of you been in touch this morning, and I'll tell you what I like, is that you mix it up. You do mix it up. Lee in Cornwall, morning to you, Lee, who's a regular, aren't you, Lee? So it's my strong belief that nothing in this country will improve or get any better until we have a complete overhaul in government. How much longer do people have to suffer under a government that's hardly done anything for them in 12 years? P.S. Today is Pancake Day in this house. What do you like on your pancakes, and do you make them fresh or from pre-packaged batter mix? Quite why you threw that in, Lee, I don't know, but it's a very interesting point.
Do you know what I like there is Lee is a man with range. We go from politics to pancakes in about 10 seconds flat.
Yeah, love it.
And that's what we like.
What do you like on a pancake?
I'm old school, so I like lemon and sugar.
You see, I like savoury pancakes. Bit of spinach cheese.
So that makes you very odd, I think. Sorry.
I never said I was normal. Making them fresh is best, Lee, but I'm afraid I have to admit pre-packaged is just
easier.
Did you know that pancake mix is the same as Yorkshire pudding mix?
I did know that, actually, and don't ask me why, but I did already know that. But do you know what, Lee? I would say to that, I wish I made pancakes more often. So I think I'm getting from this message that Pancake Day is a Sunday in your house, in which case you do it once a week, and I love that, because I only do it on Pancake Day.
Yeah, I only do it on
I feel like we should do it more often.
We should.
Very yummy.
Pancakes.
Gary has been in touch. Good morning to you, Gary. He says, back to Liz Truss, he said, this is a slap in the face to the Tory members who voted for Liz Truss. What was all the voting for? He says, I will be voting for Reform UK.
You can understand the frustration. Mm-hmm. You know, they're given an option, Conservative Party members, so they have this. But is it working? Do you think it's working, Gary? I mean, that's the thing. Do you think if you voted for Liz Truss, assuming you're a Tory Party member, do you think it's working?
What, the whole process?
The Truss government.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the thing is, she stood for growth, and she said that she'd stand for low tax and high growth, and here we are. So, I mean, the question is, does she even have a mandate anymore? Because that's what people voted for.
That's what people voted for. And we're now looking at higher taxes, according to Jeremy Hunt, who's the new Chancellor, and all the measures that were meant to stimulate growth seem to have gone.
Yes.
So what was that all about? I mean, I think it's a very fair question to ask. Tony in Bury St Edmunds, who's another regular, says, why is Liz Truss still there, a PM who couldn't answer any questions at the press conference? She's embarrassing. Yeah, I get that. And a lot of people have commented, Tony, she only took 4 questions and she gave the same answer to each and every one of them and all the rest of it. I tell you what, though, Tony, I wouldn't want to answer questions at a press conference. When you know we're a horrible bunch, us lot, in many respects. you know, they're just trying to trip her up.
Yeah.
Because it's what... I mean, don't get me wrong, they're legitimate questions, but the legitimate questions are very hard questions for her at the moment. So why would she want to take them? She's only going to look bad off the back of it. So why would you take them?
And nobody voted for her, I think, because of her public speaking skills. She's not a natural orator, especially in times difficult as this. Alison says the people obviously have no say in leadership or policies, and it would seem that the leadership don't get to lead either. Very interesting point, Alison. Lots of people are saying now that Jeremy Hunt, obviously now going against Liz Truss in terms of this 1p
policy.
tax. He's saying that that's going to be slowed down at least. Is he in charge? Is he PM now in everything but name? Very interesting.
No, or is it? I mean, I don't know. Maybe you're implying it's all down to paper coverage and all down to what the markets are doing. I've wondered about that. You know, the power of the markets. The problem is you cut the markets almost like a sort of like a being in their own right, aren't they? I don't think it's a group of men deciding the markets need to do X, Y, and Z. It's just how it develops. But you can't ignore the market because it affects how we live. But does that mean the markets are effectively running everything?
Yeah, and in a democracy, can you have markets that are that powerful?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But you do wonder. I know what you mean. You do wonder with all of this. And let's just finish off with Anthony, who says, if the Tories can't run their own party, how can they be seen to run the country? I'm so apathetic to it all now, I will probably deface my voting slip when the time comes. How else can I register my objections to this pantomime?
And that's what was being said in our newspaper review yesterday, wasn't it? That there will be a low turnout potentially at the next election, and there will be people who are spoiling their voting slips.
Yeah.
Could be something that we see if indeed we do see a general election, which could be on the cards, couldn't it?
You do wonder, because it's very difficult to see how Liz Truss can survive. I mean, in all honesty, it's difficult to see how she can survive if all the backbenchers turn against her and if members of the cabinet start turning against her. What possibly can she do? And if there is a change of leader, can that actually work without a general election?
Yeah. And can it unite a fractured Conservative Party? It's a question. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Would you welcome a general election at this time, or do you think there should be a replacement PM? Ben Wallace is on the front of the Sunday Mirror today, being suggested as perhaps the man that would be good to take over. What do you think? Do let us know.
If you've got the answers.
If you've got the answers.
We'll pass them on to number 10. We will, honestly. I think everyone needs all the help they can get at the minute. Anyway, don't go anywhere, because we've got much more to come for you, including all the newspapers in just a sec.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It is 6:31. Good morning. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
OK, let's take a look at today's front pages for you. Let's go to the Sunday Times first. And Jeremy Hunt is set to delay the penny cut to income tax.
For the Observer, senior Tories holding talks on a rescue mission this week. Well, the rescue mission, getting rid of the Prime Minister is actually what they mean by that.
The Express says rebel Tories are plotting to topple Liz Truss and replace her within weeks.
For the Sunday Telegraph, Jeremy Hunt, as we were saying there, preparing to delay the 1p cut to income tax, which is going to affect everybody, particularly the worse off, of course, which seems very strange.
In The People, 1 million workers are set to strike over this winter, wanting better pay.
For the Sunday Mirror, Liz Truss could be out at number 10 in days, as apparently senior Tories want Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, to be a unity candidate.
OK, time to go through the papers now. Joining us this morning is former Special Advisor to Boris Johnson, Jack Sellers, and anthropologist Marianne Ahotta. Good morning to you both. Thank you so much for your company. Where's my list gone now, Stephen?
Oh, here it is. We're starting with the Chancellor, Jack, in the Sunday Times.
You have to remind us who that is at the moment.
Well, that's Jeremy Hunt at the moment. This week, at least, it's Jeremy Hunt. Where, I mean, I was just saying to you in the break, he is... I don't know if he's doing this on his own or if he's doing it with the consent of number 10, but he is basically reversing every single policy that was in the mini-budget on which Liz Truss was elected leader.
Well, yeah, you're not wrong, but I don't think that's going to come as much as a surprise to people, given the context of the last few weeks. But, yeah, the Sunday Times, along with most of the papers, as we just seen, are leading on the sort of political stories today. One story of probably among 3,000 in the papers today, but the Times are leading on. Hunt takes full control as the plotters circle the wounded PM, and they're particularly focusing on, as you say, the expected delay to the cut in income tax, which Liz Truss wanted to bring forward to next year by 1 pence, which Rishi Sunak was aiming to bring in 2024, but now Jeremy Hunt's agreeing with Rishi Sunak. But this is just another continuation of a U-turn from Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget only a few weeks ago. And also, this is a reversal on probably the last and very key plank of which Liz Truss stood for the Conservative leadership in the summer. This was her whole plank of leadership throughout the summer, and now everything's sort of fallen apart. But I don't think this is... I'll go back to my original comments. I don't think this is going to come as much as a surprise to people, given the sort of desperate state that we were in on Friday when Kwasi Kwarteng was sacked and Hunt was sort of put in place. I think...
But people are going to be furious, though. People are going to be furious. They didn't mind the change with the 45p rate because they say, well, that doesn't affect us, so we don't mind that. That's fair enough. Small businesses have now lost what they're going to have that 6% rise in business rates, corporation tax, whatever it was, and now everybody else is losing their 1p benefit on income tax. People are going to be absolutely livid.
Yes, and but that's not. But the indications we're getting, based on Jeremy Hunt's sort of morning media around yesterday morning, is that that's not actually where it's all going to end. There's also potential talk of spending cuts, so across departments, public spending cuts, because then there's to fill the £72 billion black hole, the infamous black hole, which has dominated politics for the last few weeks. So, yeah, I agree with you that people are going to be furious, and unfortunately, I don't think it's going to end there. But, across the papers today, and you saw this in speculation yesterday amongst political journalists, Jeremy Hunt now, as the Times allude to, is very much seen to be in the driving seat in government, and what can Liz Truss do?
Yeah.
Really, what can Liz Truss do?
I mean, it does, Marianne, leave very big questions about Liz Truss's future, because the whole remit, not just about cutting taxes, the sort of reality to us, but it was about ripping up the Treasury orthodoxy.
Yeah.
Not about sorting out the black hole before you do something, but getting on with it and stimulating growth. So that
and
whole
this
orthodoxy,
idea of rejecting the fact that was kind of accepted, orthodoxy,
quo,
of kind of a managed decline.
But that's completely out the window now.
Yeah, that's the thing. And you're right, this kind of headline idea of the 1p on income tax, when it's coming in, when it's not going to happen. The reality is that the greater impact on people's day-to-day lives are interest rates and inflation rates. And those are fundamentally tied to whether the money markets, the economy, all those businesses, all those investors are confident or not in how well the country is being run, whether they have a certainty about whether they can invest in UK PLC. And when you get that really rocky, unstable response in the money markets, what you get is the dropping pound. You get businesses that are reliant on import-export of trade and goods just going, we can't afford to keep in business. And you've got all those small businesses and people who are working for themselves and, you know, you taking your car to the petrol pump or kind of looking at how far your money can stretch when you do your weekly shop. That's the stuff that's really going to hurt and was hurting before. And the thing is, regardless of what happens here, whether it's Jeremy Hunt in the driving seat, who is kind of doing the kind of the circling of knives around the wounded Prime Minister, it's all this kind of talk of, you know, animals and hunting. Fundamentally, I still get the sense that the Conservative Party are thinking about their own backs. What can we do in order to avoid a kind of a political catastrophe, a kind of a party catastrophe? What can we do to avoid losing the general election? And fundamentally, I really, really want them to wake up and go, actually, it's not about party politics. At this point, the boat is so rocky and people are so worried and the markets are so worried. We actually need someone to go, what's best for the country, not what's best for our gang.
Yeah, but they all do that, don't they? I mean, the Labour Party saying nothing but we want a general election right now for the past few weeks.
Yeah, I just think it's
exactly
appalling.
the same.
You know, fundamentally, I want them to just go, can we all sit down together? I know this is pie in the sky thinking, but wouldn't it be nice if they all sat down and said, who's got a good idea? Let's really interrogate it. Let's talk to the Bank of England. Let's talk to the Office for Budget Responsibility, because what they say really does matter. Not even if you don't agree with it, the markets are listening. And fundamentally, that's the kind of piece in the puzzle that just doesn't seem to have clicked yet. It's still about who's going to get power.
But that's what,
and we lose out.
That's what Jeremy Hunt is trying to do, isn't it? He's trying to calm the markets. He's trying to instill some confidence. But is it just a holding position? And he's been praised by the Governor of the Bank of England so far for tearing up this economic policy from Truss and Kwarteng. But I mean,
it's a political decision, austerity. It was a political decision 12 years ago. It wasn't necessary to inflict that much pain on people. And you've had 12 years of councils and local authorities and schools and hospitals crumbling because of a lack of investment. Jeremy Hunt cannot stand there with a smug little smile on his face saying, oh, well, we'll have to tighten our belts, folks.
Well, I don't
the
know.
roof of the hospital is already falling down. Nurses are leaving because they don't want to or can't do their job anymore.
Jack,
it's insane.
Just going back to the comments about, you know, why are the animals circling here and the headline in the Express about the secret plot to oust the PM. Respectfully, Mary, I'm not as cynical of all politicians and MPs. I suppose speaking to a lot of them yesterday, I'll contextualise my answer here in the sense that, from their point of view, the conversations they're having in the background about whether they do get rid of them. Okay, of course, there's a lot of political ambition in that. Who's going to win the next election for us, etc. But it's also a case of, you know, now is Jeremy Hunt, was Kwarteng really the problem? That's what they're thinking. Or is Liz Truss actually the one they're thinking of? Is the country in safe hands? The economy in safe hands? And from their point of view, in this whole sort of arena now, well, the sort of conversation is, well, they face two choices. The one choice for many of them is, do they face inevitable wipeout of the election and then the Labour government, who in their eyes would be more damaging for the economy? So do they accept that inevitability and go down that route? Or do they give themselves a fighting chance? Do they take the short-term pain of going through another leadership sort of election and crisis or change leadership? Do they go through that short-term pain and give themselves a fighting chance? It's sort of accept the inevitable or give
and
themselves...
would they have a fighting chance with someone like Ben Wallace, as the Mirror would say?
Well, this goes on to the conflict of interest here. Just to point out, I worked on Rishi Sunak's leadership campaign in the summer. I always believed Rishi was the best person to lead the party, and Rishi raised a lot of the points which we're seeing sort of play out in the current context. But could we? I think anyone, being brutally honest, and I apologise if Liz is watching this, but brutally honest, I think anyone is currently going to be better than the current polling. I mean, she is currently polling.
Ben Wallace had his own reasons for not standing last time. Those haven't changed, have they?
No, but he never really came out with the reasons, actually, from what many people know. There's speculation in newspapers. But, yeah, if you take yourself back to the beginning of the leadership contest in July, was it? And, yeah, Ben Wallace was the front runner amongst Conservative Party members, pulled himself out of the race. I don't know if those things have changed. We don't know if there's any interest for him to run. We don't know, by the way, if there's any interest for Rishi Sunak to do this anymore, you know? He had an absolutely brutal summer travelling the country and then sort of, get to lose at the end of it. It's not sort of the nicest... it's not the nicest experience for him, I imagine. But look, I think in terms of would that be better? I think anything at the moment would surely be better given the polling situation. I think Liz Truss is polling the most unpopular PM in this short period of time in history.
But how strange that is. Because she won, it wasn't a general election. It wasn't, the nation deciding that Liz Truss should be PM. It was members of the Conservative Party. But it wasn't, she didn't squeak in by a tiny minority. There was quite a wholehearted backing. And I think one of the things that, as a not member of the Conservative Party, one of the things that I thought, wouldn't it have been interesting, I imagine, if Kemi Badenoch had ended up being PM? Because at least, I thought, she would have done something radical. It would have been different to business as usual.
I think
and it's like Liz Truss possibly took some of those ideas and went, OK, let's just do it. Let's see what happens, guys. And unfortunately, what happened is the train fell off the tracks.
Any employer will tell you there are a lot of people who give really good interviews. And then when they get the job, they just can't perform.
But it might not be that. I think it's that people voted... They
voted against Rishi for a kick-off. They didn't
so they didn't want the business as usual. They didn't want more of the same, and they really didn't get more of the same. But the markets have responded, and now all the newspapers have, forgotten what all those opinion leaders and kind of position statements from just a few weeks ago, going, "This is a radical thing."
I mean, it's interesting. The Sun on Sunday is saying, "Are we ready for Rishi again now?" I mean, the problem with Rishi. And I don't know if you worked on the slogan or anything else, but the problem is, are we ready for Rishi that was prepared, months in advance? Clearly, he was plotting for some time. He was seen very much as a backstabber, and the party didn't like him for it.
I don't think that's true. I think that's...
Oh, you should have seen the messages we were
Well, I know,
through.
But I think that's what GB News, perhaps GB News viewers think. I think if you asked people in different network streams, then that isn't such a clear story.
But we're talking about Conservative Party members, aren't we?
I think that if you were Rishi Sunak, of course you'd see Boris Johnson as the shambles and shame that he was and go, well, OK, it's my turn now. At least I know how to tie my shoes and
but the interesting thing
I know how many children I've had.
But that's the plotting.
He did break the law. That was the problem.
That's the sort of plotting and self-preservation and self-promotion.
But it's nonsense to suggest that
Rishi... Which you were criticising people for before.
For sure, but it's nonsense to suggest that Rishi Sunak is the only person who was doing that.
Oh, no, absolutely.
I mean, what do you think Jeremy Hunt's been doing? He's stood to be leader of the party twice now.
Well, they all do it, don't they?
I mean, it's the one thing we all forget, actually, about that sort of the Rishi period when the sort of, the weeks when Boris Johnson, which led up to Boris Johnson's resignation, was that actually Rishi Sunak's resignation letter at the time, even though since obviously he's acknowledged all the issues which were building up to it with Chris Pincher and Partygate, it was a whole build-up. But actually, in his resignation letter, he set out that him and Boris were obviously moving in different directions on the economy. There was indications that Boris wanted to do some more heavier spending, and Rishi just knew that wasn't the case, which then came to play out in the summer. But going back to the overall sort of point here, what we're talking about in terms of the secret plot to oust the PM and who's better to replace him. I think also what Conservative members Conservative MPs are looking at. And I'm not making this jibe just for the sake of making a jibe, but a lot of them are also looking at the fact that even though there's this huge margin now between Labour and the Conservatives, I don't necessarily think that people there's no reason for that. But Labour are not the cause of that. If that makes sense. I mean, Labour are not doing anything particularly outstanding. The Conservative Party are imploding. So a lot of people are looking at Ben Wallace, Rishi Sunak, Kemi Badenoch, amongst others, and all thinking, well, there's still a chance here because Starmer's not exactly, even in polls about him as an individual, the public find him boring, less engaging. I don't think the public could name 5 Labour policies, potentially, to you. So they're just thinking that...
Under Boris Johnson, I couldn't name a single policy either, though, because it was all over the shop. I mean, part of this that we're in now is entirely because of him. There you go, GB News viewers. I know they generally like you folks.
Well, they like Boris.
You like Boris?
Yeah, and lots of people want to see Boris back now.
No, Mary-Anne.
Well, it's foolish to have liked him. It's not a general... But think about what it is that was good about him or bad about him, and think about the consequences of that.
But there's likeable.
Lots of people... It's not a TV show. I want boring politics where people can do their jobs, because people's lives actually matter on this. There's people this morning who didn't turn the TV on because they can't afford to, because they need to charge up an electric wheelchair. I mean, it's 2022, come on.
But many of our viewers are saying that Boris Johnson at least would have stood through a press conference and taken questions, which we didn't...
Because he doesn't care. But the only thing that's better about this is that I do think probably Liz Truss has lost.
Of course, obviously, given my description of my prior employment, that yes, I politely, Mary-Anne, disagree. You wouldn't expect me to say otherwise. Boris Johnson...
You can. You're allowed to say that he was dreadful.
But Boris Johnson, Boris Johnson had mass appeal across the country. Yes, he had his faults. Of course he does. Every politician has their faults. No one goes into this job and is the perfect character. Tony Blair wasn't, even though he had... I'd sit here and admit that Tony Blair was a very good communicator himself. He had extreme qualities of being a good leader. Boris also had those. It's just unfortunately, there was also flaws with his management style in terms of... in number 10, as we all saw. I'm going to go over the history of that. But going back to Ellie's point about there are people sort of saying that Boris should come back. I'd never say never. If you asked me 8 years ago or 10 years ago if Donald Trump would be president of the US, then I would also have said that was absolutely crazy. But
do you think that... I mean, yes, he was extremely charismatic and a lot of people like him, right? But do you think he had a close enough eye on the detail? Did he know what was going on closely enough?
Look, the thing is, every Prime Minister, you read the biographies going back, every Prime Minister has sort of the things they really, really, really want to focus on, the things they're really good at and like they're really interested in, and they're the things they want to nail their top priorities. But the whole point of having a cabinet around you with efficient people is that the cabinet around you then take away the things which you can't massively put your mind to, and they do a good job in those. With Boris's qualities, for example, through the pandemic, and Mary, I will have opinions on this, through the pandemic, he was the optimist, he was getting us through, he made early decisions on the vaccine programme, and then we come to Ukraine. Honestly, I was sat in meetings with, we were sat in meetings with the Prime Minister talking about Ukraine, and his knowledge, his sort of extensive knowledge of the area, the history of the area, the politics of the area were second to none.
And very important. But what about levelling up, which is part of the reason he got elected? Which, of course, nothing ever happened on that. I mean, I know you can say, well, the pandemic took over, and I totally understand that. But that should have been a priority for him, shouldn't it?
This 100% was. There was a few priorities which tapped in with me. You know, I'm very much Welsh, and levelling up was one of them. These areas of Wales which are completely out of touch with politics. A lot of your viewers will agree with this. Is across the country, people in the north of England, completely out of touch. Not out of touch. They're disengaged. Is the better word with politics. And Boris appealed to these people for the first time. We had people voting Conservative in 2019 who hadn't voted Conservative before, and the majority of that was because of Boris, because he appealed to these people and he gave them a vision of what he wanted to improve their lives, improve their opportunities. And he was focused on that. But like you said, bearing in mind, so he was there 3 years, 2.5 years, December 2019 to just July just gone. And yeah, there was a pandemic in the first instance. Then we had a good few months, I would say. We had a good period through 2021 where we were delivering on the priorities, levelling up. We got the Levelling Up Fund and all these other things out there, spending money across the country. And then the problems took over, which then led to his downfall, because we couldn't talk about anything else.
Look, well, we need to leave it there. Fascinating, though, to talk to both of you. Mary-Anne, Jack, thank you very much indeed. They're going to be back in the next hour. Let's just run you through some of the headlines.
The government is pressing ahead with legal measures to keep Britain moving during strikes. Legislation will introduce minimum service levels when transport workers take industrial action. Unions are criticising the move, with many believing it would be unworkable.
Iran's state news agency says at least 8 people have been injured in a prison in Iran amid reports of gunfire. Footage of the incident has been shared on social media, but it's not been independently verified.
Suella Braverman has unveiled plans for a major crackdown on climate protests. The Home Secretary says it will give the police new powers to take a more proactive approach to protests, with some of the measures specifically targeted at the tactics used by some environmental groups.
And a lot of those Paddington bears and other teddies left in remembrance of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth outside the palace and Windsor Castle have now been cleaned. They're being delivered to Bernardo's Children's Services. Let's turn to film, should we now, and the highly anticipated upcoming release of something called She Said.
Yes, it's a film that plots the origin story of the Harvey Weinstein case, starring Carey Mulligan as the journalist who broke the truth about Hollywood's most infamous monster.
Let's talk to our showbiz reporter, Stephanie Tecci, who's here. Morning, Stephanie.
Good morning, Stephen and Ellie. Hey.
I mean, this look is going to be hugely controversial, if only because it's so raw. There's still a case going on.
Me Too has been one of the most scandalous cases which has rocked Hollywood over the past few years. It's changed the whole way the industry is set up. And at the moment, we're coming to the end of London Film Festival. And one of the most talked about films is She Said, which stars Carey Mulligan as one of the journalists, Megan Twohey, who works at New York Times, who broke the story at the time. And they gathered so much information from hundreds of women about the case and, you know, this so-claimed assaults that Harvey was doing against so many actresses, his own employees. And, you know, Carey herself has said, working on it, she was pretty frightened to do this because she wanted to give the role the justice it deserves. And she's like, you're hearing these stories of everyday heroes who've been brave enough to speak about what was actually going on in Hollywood. Because, you know, beyond all this case, Stephen and Ellie, there was a system of abuse of power that was going on, which has been in Hollywood for decades. So now seeing this come to the big screen, it's going to be quite fascinating. And Harvey himself was back in court this week with 11 further accusations of sex abuse.
I mean, his team are saying this film is going to mean he can't get a fair trial because he was prosecuted in jail in New York. This is now in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
The new one. I think it's going to impede his fair trial.
Well, to be honest, I think everyone knows about this case. It's well documented. So, to be honest, I don't think this film will, in my opinion, impede the trial at all because, to be honest, it's been well documented in the newspapers. It's been the most talked about thing in Hollywood. When you talk about Me Too, the first name that's going to come up is Harvey Weinstein. So with this film, I think actually it'll be quite good for people to see actually how this investigation actually came to be.
And it was such a huge investigation, wasn't it? I mean, it's already been a book. She said, I have already read it. It's incredible what these female journalists what they were up against, people trying to silence them everywhere.
Yeah, and, you know, it was the fact that hundreds of women, Ellie, from all over the world started coming out. It's like they really lit a match, which just literally brought light to what was going in Hollywood and exposing it. Me, myself, I've met Harvey Weinstein. I met Harvey Weinstein, He used to do all these glorious Hollywood parties in London, you know, after the BAFTAs. And once you'll be in that room, you'll see all of Hollywood there, all of the actresses, all of the actors. And for me, it's quite scary to think that no one at the time really spoke about what was really going on.
What was your impression of him when you met him?
When you meet Harvey, you think he was a very charming man. He was like very laid back, very funny, very welcoming, you know, like, you know, being at those parties with all those Hollywood stars, you would think he was the god of Hollywood. And he was.
Well, he was.
He was the god of Hollywood, and that's how much power he had at that time. So to see his fall of grace has been very surprising to me.
Well, we've got that picture.
Yes.
Let's get it up because we're out of time.
Yeah.
There you go.
So that was me and Harvey back at one of his BAFTA after parties, and I've interviewed him several times, and it's horrible to think what he was doing to women in the industry. But She Said will be out on November 25th in cinemas. It'll be a good watch. Highly recommend it.
I'm sure it will. Stephanie, thanks very much indeed. Look, don't go anywhere. We've got all the top stories coming up after the weather.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking blustery with showers becoming confined to the far north. Elsewhere, mostly dry. Let's take a look at the details.
Well, across the south and west, dry, plenty of sunshine this morning, although some cloud will spread across the region later.
A dry start across the south and east with plenty of sunshine. However, cloud will move across the region from the south during the morning.
Now, it's going to be a fine and dry start with a fair amount of sunshine during the morning in Wales. Cloud, though, will increase from the south by late morning.
The Midlands will be fine and dry with prolonged sunny spells for all during the morning. However, cloudier skies will spread northwards from late morning. Winds mostly light but becoming slightly breezier into the afternoon.
To the northeast of England, then, it's going to be dry with prolonged sunny spells. Slightly cloudier in the far west with some patchy rain around. Winds mostly light, but they will increase.
Rather windy with showers continuing to affect the north and west of Scotland during the morning, but those easing somewhere into the afternoon. Elsewhere dry with decent sunny spells.
For Northern Ireland, dry. Lots of sunshine at first, but skies will turn hazy from mid-morning. Outbreaks of cloud and rain arriving during the afternoon.
Cloud and rain accompanied with strong winds will spread north and east during the afternoon and evening, and that is how your weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
The Chancellor has admitted that mistakes were made in the mini-budget, and as a result, some taxes will have to go up.
Morning to you, 7 o'clock, Sunday the 16th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie.
We're live across the whole of the UK on your TV and your radio and online, so wherever you are in the world, you can take us with you. Here are your top stories this morning.
Well, the new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, says the Prime Minister's administration made mistakes and there were difficult decisions ahead. He plans to release a medium-term finance plan on the 31st of October, which he's now calling a proper budget.
Meanwhile, the Bank of England is warning that interest rate increases could be bigger than previously thought. This, as Andrew Bailey says, a stronger response may be needed to fight inflation.
Now, the Queen Consort has been seen by a lot of Paddington bears and other teddies, huge piles of them. They were the ones left at royal residences in memory of Queen Elizabeth, and they'll be sent to Barnardo's.
And as ever, you can join in on any of our discussions this morning by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Now, the Chancellor has admitted the government went too far too fast with its mini-budget plans to grow the economy.
In a statement released last night, Jeremy Hunt admitted that it won't be an easy road ahead, but maintained his focus will be growth underpinned by stability.
Well, he also suggested that tax rises could form part of a painful fiscal package designed to restore market confidence.
Well, meanwhile, the Bank of England has warned of higher interest rates than expected next month in a bid to tackle inflation.
Now, the Governor, Andrew Bailey, says a stronger response may be needed than originally forecast.
Well, for more analysis, let's speak now to the senior feature writer at the Daily Mail, Guy Adams. Good morning to you, Guy. Oh, we don't have Guy with us at the moment, but we do have lots of your GB views.
Yes,
lots of you have been in touch with us.
Fill the gap. I mean, look, most of you are saying this is just a bit of a nightmare. Chris has been in touch, says Conservative members have been criticised for choosing Liz Truss. However, MPs gave us the choice of two, neither of whom many of us wanted. The country voted for Boris in huge numbers. Knowing what he was like, MPs then got rid of him despite the electorate's mandate. And we hear that a lot. The problem is, of course, Prime Ministers have to work with their members of Parliament. And, you know, and they decided they didn't want to work with Boris Johnson. They also didn't particularly want to work with Liz Truss. I mean, she only got 50 votes in the first round of that leadership campaign. But, of course, all the toing and froing, and now here we are. But they still don't want to work with her. And this is going to be, despite all the economic issues, that's still one of her fundamental problems, that most of her backbenchers didn't want her in there in the first place, which is what we saw with Jeremy Corbyn.
Yes.
Isn't it? I mean, that was the issue with Jeremy Corbyn, and what brought him down ultimately was that most of his backbenchers didn't want him to be the leader of the Labour Party.
And ultimately, nobody, well, a very small percentage, Conservative Party members voted for Liz Truss. The general public did not, and it must be very frustrating, people watching at home thinking, you know, none of us voted for this.
Yeah,
Alison says this, she says, how was everyone coming down? Oh, no, that's the wrong one, sorry, it's Kathy I wanted to say. I did vote for Truss, unfortunately, because I wouldn't vote for that backstabber Sunak, which is what you were saying earlier. Lots of people did see him as a backstabber towards Boris Johnson. But she does say they need to change the way that they remove or appoint a Prime Minister, as this is just a mess. And it is that idea, isn't it, of the Conservative Party members voting for who's in charge.
We are in a mess, and there's, sadly, whoever you support, there's no getting away from that. Let's talk to Guy Adams then from the Daily Mail, who hopefully that line is up and running now. Morning to you, Guy.
Morning, Stephen.
I mean, look, whoever you support, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, how, you know, the Mail's take on all of this has changed dramatically. I can't remember what the headline was yesterday, but you know, it's pretty grim on Liz Truss. After the mini-budget, you were saying, at last, a proper Tory budget. I mean, you're clearly reading the room on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty bumpy couple of weeks. There's no secret of that. And I think our leader yesterday explained, you know, we backed Liz Truss with a degree of optimism, and we're very disappointed by how the last fortnight or slightly longer has panned out.
Doing wrong?
Excuse me?
What's she doing wrong?
Well, look, the markets have been incredibly bumpy, and the recent problems have stemmed from her mini budget, which or from Kwasi Kwarteng's mini budget, which was had some perfectly sensible measures in it, and set measures she said she was going to take during the leadership campaign, but was clearly announced far too quickly, without the OBR being asked to sort of to advise. And clearly rattled the markets.
I wanted to bring in the view of Alison, who got in touch with us in the 6 o'clock hour. She said that people have no say in leadership or policies, and she now says she doesn't think leaderships get to lead either, perhaps implying that it's the media or the markets that dictate how things should be done. How much would you agree or disagree with that statement, with, you know, the Daily Mail seeming to turn against Liz Truss yesterday, and as Stephen was so rightly saying, just a few weeks ago, seemed to be her biggest fan of her policies?
I can't speak for the Mail, but I can speak for well, a leader is clearly meant to lead, and good leadership does not involve giving your party a sort of 30-point deficit in the opinion polls. It doesn't involve losing the faith of most of your MPs, and it doesn't involve forcing the Bank of England to intervene in the bond markets, which has cost to the tune of 65 billion quid.
I mean, look, it's our viewers and listeners, Guy, who come up with some really good thoughts. Yvonne says, her problem is her personality, which cannot be changed. Members didn't know her as a person and voted for her policies. She has to go. Well, the problem is all of those policies are now being absolutely ripped apart, aren't they? I mean, well, what we're hearing from Jeremy Hunt is a complete reversal on those policies.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to be, because what I think Mrs. Truss has realised is that you can't sacrifice if you're a prime minister. The most important thing you have to do is people have to have faith in your sort of stewardship of the economy. And people had completely lost faith. The markets had lost faith. And by reversing pretty much everything that they originally intended to do, hopefully they can calm the markets, and hopefully they can ride out a sort of bumpy patch. I mean, the problem is, obviously, you've then surrendered all your kind of political leverage, and voters simply won't trust you anymore.
Go. Guy, does that mean she has to go?
Sorry. I think it depends. I mean, so my colleagues in Westminster's view, I think probably when I sort of discussed this on Friday with them, was that, look, we're not in a situation where she has days, but she probably doesn't have months either. She's going to have to turn this thing around in weeks.
How does the situation stand right now? I mean, the papers are saying that it is Jeremy Hunt in full control right now. Does she have any authority left? Is it Jeremy Hunt who is Prime Minister in all but name?
I don't think she has any authority left on fiscal policy. Obviously, that's only one of the things that a Prime Minister does. She is still Prime Minister. And, look, I think Jeremy Hunt's probably in charge of the Exchequer, which to a degree all Chancellors are, of course. But no, I mean, if she wants to define her premiership in any sort of meaningful way, she'll have to look at other policy areas, I think, besides economics, which is going to be very, very difficult if we're headed for an economic crisis.
You do wonder how any of this can end in anything other than a general election, don't you? In the sense that, if there is a change of leader, whether that be Jeremy Hunt or Rishi Sunak or Ben Wallace, or whoever you want to believe in the papers this morning, if there is a change of leader, how on earth can they keep going without a general election? Because the pressure then would be absolutely immense.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's going to be a general election pretty soon anyway, but there's history does repeat itself, doesn't it? And I get kind of quite strong early 1990s vibes about this whole situation, in that, the party kind of knows the Conservatives have been in government one way or another for 12 years now. I think the party, there are elements even within the party, and you speak to MPs. I had dinner with a Conservative MP this week. There's almost a feeling amongst them that maybe a period in opposition, what might in a funny way be a good thing, would allow them to sort of have a breather and kind of work out what they stand for. I think they've sort of lost sight of that slightly in the last couple of years.
Yeah, very possibly. Guy, good to talk to you this morning. Thanks very much indeed. I mean, and that's the thing, I think, that when you do talk privately to MPs, a lot of them do say, it's time for Tory MPs I'm talking about. It's time for a change. It isn't what the people who vote for them want to hear, but it's the reality of politics at times.
It really is, yeah. New analysis of IMF figures by the Labour Party reveals that the UK is set to have the second lowest level of business investment over the next few years.
Well, the party's been calling for the government to reverse its mini-budget, but what would they do differently? Let's talk to Jonathan Reynolds, who's the Shadow Business Secretary. Morning to you. Nice to see you again. Look, I mean, if what we're reading in the papers is correct, if what we heard from Jeremy Hunt yesterday is correct, you're getting what you wanted. you're getting a reverse, basically an entire reversal on the mini budget, and with the prospect of actually tax rises coming in as well.
Well, good morning. Look, I don't think anyone right now can say they're getting what they want. I mean, look, the last 3 weeks have been a disgrace. No matter how you voted, you deserve a lot better than this. And frankly, look, this is not about what Tory MPs are plotting to do or who's taking over certain jobs in the government. It is about the fact that the damage has been done. Mortgages are now higher than they would have been were it not for this mini budget. Business investment will be lower, as we're saying today with this story from the IMF figures, because of what the government have done. The government's borrowing costs are higher because of what the government has done, with consequences for everyone. So no, I can't be happy with any of this. I think, yes, the mini budget was clearly the start of this. The cost of government borrowing spiked by an incredible amount in the 3 trading days after those announcements were made. But the fact is the damage has now been done, and I honestly cannot see how any Conservative turns this round. Of course, as a Labour MP, I want a general election. You would expect me to say that. But political instability does feed into economic instability. So can they just simply change the Prime Minister every month without any regard for how this looks or for what this means? Surely the only logical way out of this situation is a general election. So yes, I'm pleased that some of the decisions will be turned around. But frankly, look, the damage has been done. And I think we do need that election as the only logical way forward.
Yes, but the damage can be undone, Carl. I mean, what Jeremy Hunt is proposing is, I can't imagine is going to be popular with very many people in real terms who are looking forward to a tax reduction next April. But actually, this proper budget, as he's now calling it, on the 31st of October, could undo a lot of the damage, couldn't it?
Well, will mortgages be lower than they were? Will they go down from the average of 6% for a fixed rate right now? I don't think that is the case. Will the black hole that we think is in the government's finances, we honestly don't know, because we haven't had the proper forecast that we would expect for a budget like the mini budget was. Do we know how that will be filled? Look, you can't simply, once you lose confidence, you can't just win it back as easily as you lost it. And this is what Conservative MPs have got to understand. There are real world consequences for their incompetence, and they can't simply pretend that this hasn't happened or that somehow they aren't responsible for it. Look, what we need is a government that isn't committed to this ridiculous notion that if you do tax cuts for the well-off, that trickles down to everyone. We need one that respects institutions, doesn't sack civil servants who might disagree with them or disrespect the OBR, has a real plan. Look, what business needs is not the government getting out of the way. It's a partner with long-term policy, stability, so they can invest for the long term. No one would suggest that this is, what the Conservative Party is offering at the moment. And again, look, it's not about a change of Chancellor. Look, they can't simply reverse what they've done through something as straightforward as that. They can't simply get around the fact that the Bank of England and the government have been in completely different places for the last month. They've got to recognise what they have done requires the chance for a real fresh start, and that will require a general election.
Jonathan, as you say, confidence is key, stability is key, but many people, many Conservative MPs, many of the papers saying that if this was a Labour government, we'd be in a worse economic position. What would Labour be doing differently now? What would your fiscal policy be?
Well, the one thing I would agree with the Prime Minister on is that the last 12 years have been very poor for economic growth. So our plan for economic growth is based on long-term industrial strategy to drive up business investment, so we're not the second lowest in the G20 for that. It's reforming things like business rates, which are real barriers to investment. It's improving our trading relationship with the single market. I mean, why should Canada have a better preferential trade deal with the rest of the single market than we have? It's about reforming skills. I mean, skills and labour shortages are the biggest issue for business in this country right now. These are the things that would make a difference. And specifically on fiscal policy, we believe you can borrow money to address a crisis like the energy crisis. We believe you can borrow to invest, but we don't believe, as the government believes, that you can borrow money for unfunded tax cuts for the better off. So everything we put forward is always funded by ways to raise the revenue to do that. We'd be borrowing less because our windfall tax would be more expansive. And on sources of revenue, we'd abolish things like the non-dom rule, which would bring in over £3 billion. We would tax private equity differently, so we'd bring in more money from that. But we would only spend in day-to-day expenditure what we bring in with taxation. And that commitment to fiscal responsibility, I think, has been entirely vindicated by having a government that hasn't been committed to that, and the consequences of that are now evident for everyone to see.
Problem with all that is that, I mean, the markets presumably, well, I mean, I'm guessing that the markets would quite like to hear that. I'm no market expert, Jonathan. But, you know, anything that brings about that level of stability, all well and good. The problem is that people in the country, and it's probably why they voted for what Liz Truss was talking about during her leadership campaign, was that people are needing an immediate response and saying, well, we'll do X, Y and Z that's going to come into play in 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, 4 years, then that's not what people were wanting to hear. People were wanting something radical that was going to help them now.
Well, of course, people haven't had a chance to vote on Liz Truss's agenda. She's put forward a completely different agenda to the one that won the Conservatives the 2019 general election. And, of course, I think the instability partly comes from the fact that Conservative MPs themselves don't really think there's a mandate for this kind of radical experiment and the consequences that it has. Look, I think people are crying out for some hope for the future. I mean, that public services are in a state in this country, as well as the national finances and their own personal finances, as a result of what the Conservative Party have done. But I don't think they expect a magic wand. I don't think they expect government to come along and solve all their problems, but they do want people who are serious, who have serious plans. I think the commitment to why you've got to have things like fiscal responsibility is now clear for everybody to see, because they've seen, frankly, people who aren't committed to those things come along, and it means for them higher mortgage payments, it means lower living standards, it means a real squeeze on their personal incomes, and frankly any reversion to the existing rate of national insurance will not address. So that they've seen that, and I think that's what they're in the market for. And the best way to test that, by the way, would of course be a general election where they would really get a chance to have their say. And I think, frankly, where we're heading to, I hope, will get us to that point, because I see no other way out of this crisis that's been made in Downing Street other than a chance to change the occupant of Downing Street in a real democratic way, which is through an election.
Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds, thanks very much. Good to talk to you this morning. I'd love to know if you agree with him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, how the Labour Party have been, frankly, bleating on about general election for months, right? And for a lot of it, and as an experienced journalist, you sort of go, here they go again. They're pulling the line. You know, they know they're not going to get one, but all they talk about is general election, general election, general election. Well, now it actually seems like they may have a point.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? We've reached that point where perhaps you sort of say, well, is that what we need? Does the country need to have a say now in all of this? Do you think it's time to have a say?
Yeah, do let us know. Lots of you have been in touch this morning. Diana in Swansea. Good morning to you, Diana. She says, if this were another country, we would describe what is happening as a coup. Weird, isn't it? All these unelected people taking control of the country and making fundamental changes that no one has voted for. She says Jeremy Hunt is acting as Prime Minister, which is what many people say. He is Prime Minister and everything but name, because Liz Truss has lost her authority.
Which is interesting. Diana says it's ironic when you think Hunt was just about the first out of the leadership contest by his own party members, but now he's being placed as the next PM. Possibility, isn't it? Of course, whoever is the next Prime Minister, if that, because, you know, it seems inevitable now. But, of course, they'd have to be almost anointed by the party, if you like. So would he then stand a chance? I don't know. I don't know that he would. Keep your thoughts coming through. GBViews at gbnews.uk.
Well, there's lots more to come, including all of the sport with Aidan. That's after this. Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking blustery, with showers becoming confined to the far north. Elsewhere, mostly dry. Let's take a look at the details.
Well, across the south and west, dry, plenty of sunshine this morning, although some cloud will spread across the region later.
A dry start across the south and east with plenty of sunshine. However, cloud will move across the region from the south during the morning.
Now, it's going to be a fine and dry start with a fair amount of sunshine during the morning in Wales. Cloud, though, will increase from the south by late morning.
The Midlands will be fine and dry with prolonged sunny spells for all during the morning. However, cloudier skies will spread northwards from late morning. Winds mostly light but becoming slightly breezier into the afternoon.
To the northeast of England, then, it's going to be dry with prolonged sunny spells. Slightly cloudier in the far west with some patchy rain around. Winds mostly light, but they will increase.
Rather windy with showers continuing to affect the north and west of Scotland during the morning, but those easing somewhere into the afternoon. Elsewhere dry with decent sunny spells.
For Northern Ireland, dry, lots of sunshine at first, but skies will turn hazy from mid-morning. Outbreaks of cloud and rain arriving during the afternoon.
Cloud and rain accompanied with strong winds will spread north and east during the afternoon and evening, and that is how your weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
"7:24 morning, you're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. Just got to very quickly say, because Marianne is very controversial, as you know, on the papers, right? She does it deliberately, you know. For the first, I think what is possibly the first time ever, we've had a couple of messages in agreeing with her. Sue in Canterbury said, "Well said, Marianne, giving another view of life today. I know a lot of people thought Boris was wonderful, but in honesty, he really wasn't." And David in Newmarket says, "Well said, Ms. Hotter, re Boris Johnson. The man was and is a disgrace. I, as a Tory party member, am proud that I didn't vote for him as leader, nor did I vote for the shambles that is Truss."
Yep.
And Baz in Cardiff says, "As a first-time Conservative voter, I voted for the charismatic Boris. Unfortunately, he did not deliver. Talk is cheap." Anyway, if you disagree with that, get in touch.
Yeah,
all
do
views
keep
welcome,
them coming
please.
in. Yes, we do love to hear from you. Now, you'll be very pleased to hear that Aidan McGee is in the studio to take us through all of the weekend's biggest sports stories. Good morning, Aidan.
Morning, Ellie.
How are you doing?
Morning, Stephen. How you doing?
Morning. Yeah, we're all right. We're all right. Should we start with what happened yesterday?
Yeah, why not? I mean, it wasn't a fascinating day of Premier League action. I mean, we saw a very dull game between Leicester and Crystal Palace. Decent game on Friday, of course, which we referenced yesterday. Harry Kane on the score sheet for Tottenham against Everton. They made hard work of that, but they got past Everton eventually. Wolves and Nottingham Forest, two really struggling teams, but again, Wolves prevail with a penalty. Nottingham Forest in deep trouble. Now, Fulham Bournemouth, really good game at the bottom of the table, 2-2, bit of controversy with a penalty. So a decent set of games yesterday in terms of what happened, but what wasn't exactly exciting in terms of the teams involved. The real feast is today, I would argue.
Well, yeah, you've got big guns playing, haven't you?
Yeah, you have. I mean, if you take Liverpool and Manchester City on their own, I mean, my concern, I have said this already yesterday, is that Liverpool has to go for it now. They're in great form in terms of winning at Glasgow Rangers on Wednesday night, the 7-1 result, having been 1-0 down away from home, really difficult to do that. but they're going to have to attack Liverpool today. Sorry, they're going to have to attack Manchester City because
it's Anfield, isn't it?
It is, but they don't. If they lose today against Manchester City, Manchester City got a wretched record at Anfield. They played there 2 years ago and won. But that was when there were no crowd. There was no punters in there, so they didn't have to contend with the fabled Anfield atmosphere. But if Liverpool attack, you're then giving licence to Manchester City to make use of those spaces that they leave behind. And with Erling Haaland rested in the week, he's going to be fresh. Bernardo Silva's going to be fresh. But Phil Foden's going to be fresh. You know, I don't like the consequences of what Liverpool could face if they overcommit in attack. However, I'll tell you what, who will be watching this interestingly, Arsenal, because they're already a point ahead at the top of the table. They go to Leeds today. Leeds haven't got particularly great form. If they win at 2 o'clock, they could be in a situation where they're 4 points clear at the top of the Premier League. And with Manchester City going to Liverpool, whatever form Liverpool are in, it's still very, very difficult.
If Liverpool lose, they're 16 points behind.
They are. But I'm saying if Man City lose, then Arsenal 4 points clear at the top of the table. I mean, they're not in the Champions League. It's a World Cup year as well, in the middle of the season, so you've got these kind of condensed fixtures either side of that 5-week period. It's going to come down to the squad in the second half of the season. It's always Man City who do well when the squad's involved because they've got more players than anybody else and they spend more money. So they tend to keep their players fit as well. Man United's interesting as well because that's a real test. Man United, Newcastle coming over the hill at us with all this money they've got. Man United have recovered pretty well from that defeat earlier on in the season against Brentford. They did lose against Manchester City a couple of weeks ago, 6-3 as we know. So interesting one there as well. Villa and Chelsea. Steven Gerrard's under pressure now. If they lose at home to Chelsea, which is eminently possible, Chelsea have had a blow as well with Reece James being out of the World Cup now, the right back. He's got a serious problem, so he's not going to make the England squad, I don't think. Well, definitely now, I think the manager's confirmed Graham Potter. So Steven Gerrard, they lose at home today. I think that's 2 wins all season. He's lost his coach, who's come to my club, QPR, who were doing brilliantly, notwithstanding yesterday's result at Luton. And people are starting to say...
They're doing brilliantly, apart from the fact they lost.
They did. They lost to Luton Town, who are a bit of a rival. But what I'm saying is that if... People are now saying that now this guy's left, was he the brains behind Steven Gerrard? So, you know, it's probably not fair because he's competing at a different level now. But if they lose that at home, I think that he might be in a little bit of trouble there.
Disappointing, I have to... Well, I was going to say disappointing. That's probably not fair because the boxing yesterday was important in and of its own right, that it was happening, capacity crowd and all the rest of it. And the British contender, Savannah Marshall, was the underdog.
I don't know if she was an underdog. It was a 50-50 fight. But I could notice a difference between the contenders. Sometimes the British defenders, male or female, are a bit overhyped, and there was a definite difference. A bit like when Joshua fought Usyk a month or so ago, or 6 weeks ago, whenever it was. I could see there was a difference. She gave a very excellent account of herself, but it was a brilliant fight, I have to say. It was a fantastic tear-up, you know, as they say in East London, you know, especially outside the pubs on a Friday night, a bit of a tear-up. It was that kind of thing. But I think that... I do think it went the distance. She landed some brilliant punches. She was in trouble a few times, Claressa Shields, but she was the calibre boxer. She was the one who moved better. She looked impossible to knock off her feet. I think you're looking there at probably the best female boxer we've ever seen.
You know, it was a big crowd as well, wasn't it?
20,000, yeah, really good. And as an event, it was excellent. We had Ben Shalom on yesterday. He was in the ring afterwards. He was right in the centre of things. He would have been delighted with how things went. It was great to have on the show yesterday. And, just a terrific event. And Savannah Marshall will come back. She'll fairly embryonic, but I think she's come up with against an opponent, a bit like Joshua with Usyk, who's just that much better.
But it was history-making, wasn't it?
Without question. I mean, I never thought we'd see an all-female card. It was only 1998, Ellie, when female boxing was illegal.
I can't believe that.
I know.
It's amazing.
There's the lady, I think her name was Couch, I think. She went to... She had to go to the High Court to get a licence to fight because the men who were running boxing at the time felt that women were too emotionally...
Is it Jane Couch?
Yeah, Jane Couch, yeah. Well done.
Very good, Frank.
Do you
think he's quite good, isn't he? But do you think we'll see a lot of young girls now trying to pick up boxing?
Well, I don't see why not. It was such an event last night. Got a fly in my head, sorry.
We're infested.
I should wear that aftershave. It normally repels it. So, I think we will see more, certainly, because it's more of a spectacle. Then it's proved that commercially it can hold its own. I don't know what the numbers were like in terms of the viewing, but I mean, I made up... Goodness me, getting right on my way here, tell you. So we need some fly spray.
I think there were quite a few people watching it, though.
Yeah, it was really good.
My friends,
really good. Just a quick word on the Rugby League as well. England won 66 against Samoa. That was the opening game yesterday.
66.
At St James. Yeah, and so we were underdogs going into it.
Really?
They were underdogs, yeah, they were. And Samoa were terrible, and that brings England nicely into their game against France next week at Bolton.
Good.
Very good.
It's good.
Good for us, anyway.
Good for Bolton.
Not so good for them. Thanks, Aidan.
Look, much more to come for you, including all the news and views from this morning's newspapers.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good morning and welcome back. The time has just gone 7:33. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
Let's have a look at the papers for you this morning, and they're all very similar once again. The Sunday Times says Jeremy Hunt is set to delay the penny cut to income tax.
The Express says rebel Tories are plotting to topple Liz Truss and replace her within weeks.
For The Observer, senior Tories holding talks on a rescue mission this week.
In the Mirror, Liz Truss could be out of number 10 in days as senior Tories want Ben Wallace as PM.
Oh, what do you make of all of that? I don't know what to think, but hopefully former Special Advisor to Boris Johnson, Jack Sellers, and anthropologist Mariana Hotter have got a clue. Morning to you both.
Stretch.
Jack, actually, we're going to talk about something entirely different, which I hadn't realised looking at that. We're talking about the strikes in the Sunday Mirror. The Sunday Mirror is saying 1 million workers are set to go on strike.
Yeah, look, Stephen, the papers, as I said earlier, are completely dominated by politics today, but, you know, there are lots of other things going on, and there are lots of... This is actually attached to politics. This is another huge potential problem for Liz Truss over the winter, amongst other things. But, yeah, so in the Mirror, they're running the story that more than 1 million people could go on strike this winter as union bosses plan to join forces on this coordinated action. They're talking specifically about Unison and GMB, who, even alone, they would already have over 1 million workers going out on strike. You know, this won't be a huge of a surprise story for your viewers or amongst us, even because, you know, we've had a summer and even last week of rail strikes, lots of disruption. But there could be more to come with nurses balloting at the moment. Obviously, there's postal strikes. So this could be another huge headache for Liz Truss over the winter, and will be, will replicate what some of your viewers were able to remember from previous years in the 70s, etc. But not me. I can't quite go back that far, unfortunately. But it's a big problem. It's a really big problem. The interesting political dynamic around all this for me is that, if in a way, if Liz, people will look to the government now on the back of what Liz Truss promised in the mini budget, tax cuts for the top income bands and all this sort of stuff, and the bankers' bonuses, and people will look at this and say, well, if you can find, obviously we now know she couldn't find the money, but if you can promise that sort of thing, why can't you give working people a pay rise? But in more conservative days, I think there would be a very easy argument for the Conservatives, or discussion at least, about why the problems of raising pay with inflation at 10% or whatever would be hugely inflationary for the rest of the country, hugely problematic for the economy. But it's just interesting in the political context. We can't really have those sensible discussions right now because we're all talking about everything else.
The elephant in the room, yeah. And it's so interesting. We had Simon Calder in earlier, travel correspondent for The Independent, and we were talking about these new laws on strikes that are currently going through Parliament, pressing ahead with that move to introduce minimum service levels. So that would try and take away some of the power of the unions on the railway.
Yeah. Well, at the moment, it seems as if the government are still committed to moving forward with that legislation. Me and Mary-Anne were talking about this just before, actually, because another newspaper is covering this. But this is nothing new. I think, as Simon said earlier, this happens in other countries. I think France and Spain, were some of the ones listed earlier, where this sort of things happen. But I mean, for a lot of people across the country, that'll be a huge relief, after the summer we've just had with
Mary-Anne?
Well, I'm hugely supportive of workers' rights to strike, because that's the way workers have power, and we can hold, power to account. And collectively, you have much more bargaining power rather than, the origin of the workers' unions movement were the Tolpuddle martyrs, who were these farm labourers in the 1830s who had received 3 lots of pay reductions for doing the same job. And they were worried about mechanisation and basically just being told, you haven't got any work this week. And literally their children were starving in their rural cottages or what have you. And they said, OK, well, if we get together, then we can argue for better conditions. We can negotiate better conditions. And when you read the story, they've got a really good website. There's a little museum based down in Tolpuddle, the village that these 7 men who sort of stood up and then were prosecuted for it and sent to Australia in the end. What happened is you read it and you go, well, that's obviously an abuse of power from those who had the capacity to do something that would stop people from starving. And absolutely bang on for them standing up for their rights and trying to fight oppression, and for the Tolpuddle martyrs paying a hugely personal price. And the thing is, you've got stories in the paper now, in the Express. You've got a survey by disabled charity Family Fund. 90% of households who are caring for disabled or seriously ill children are now either falling behind on regular bills, or not replacing things like washing machines because they can't afford to, or skipping or cutting the size of their meals. And that is the reality. You've got one of the other papers is running a story about the Sussex Police Force, who have set up a community kitchen for their own officers, because the lowest pay a police officer gets is 23 grand. It's lower than the UK average. And they're being expected to literally put their lives on the line and protect the rest of us. And they, there's lots of young officers who are still living at home because they can't afford to live independently. They're skipping meals themselves. A police officer is skipping meals because they can't afford to live. And the reality is that if we just kind of throw up our hands and go, oh, well, there's not that much money, we're just going to have to, grit our teeth and get through it.
Yeah, but the whole sort of political side of that is that you're meant to, we want them to come up with strategies which will generate money, grow the economy, bring in extra tax revenue, which actually may happen by reducing taxes. Weirdly, that's how all this
possibly
works. But rather than just throw money at these problems.
Agreed. It can't just be you print more and you give it out. But I think fundamentally that was one of the things that really struck me as a lack of understanding in the way that Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss made their big sort of rabbit out of the hat mini-budget announcements that so panicked the markets. It was sort of like a da-da moment, but everybody went, wait, what? And actually, when you've got that much fear, people are suddenly massively worried about whether they're going to be able to pay their mortgages or be able to get a new mortgage and refinance. They're massively worried about what's going to happen to my savings or my pension. I'm worried about my job. That is not the way that people are going to put their hands in their pocket and get a takeaway that night or get their hair done or book a holiday or buy some extra presents at Christmas time, or
so-
go, I'm going to take on an extra member of staff because I think we're going to be OK.
That's a fair point, Jack, isn't it?
Yeah, no, but if there's anything which the last few weeks have shown us with all the economic turmoil, is that we can't, going back to Miranda said this herself, and yourself, Stephen, that you can't just go around printing money. You know, what's interesting about both of these sort of stories, I'll come on to the disabled family story in a second, but just going back sort of to the strike and this whole conversation is that, like I said, in more sensible economic conservative times, there would be a conversation about this and the impact that would have. And there's going to be loads of private sector people across the country in jobs which are, relatively, in the early 20,000s or whatever, who are also going to be struggling, and they'd be making these arguments to the public sector workers. Why should you get a pay rise of 10%, and the impacts that this will all have? And it's just a serious conversation, because we've all now seen in the past few weeks alone the impacts of this on the real world and on people's mortgages, like you say. And going on to the disabled, on the disability sort of the cost of living for those, this is something quite personal to me, actually. I know I've got friends who have disabled children, and now the cost of living is a well-known word for a lot of people. But in normal times, if you've got a disabled child or someone disabled in your family, the cost of living itself is very, very high. Anyway, that's getting around and installing lifts in your home or whatever it is to suit your needs. But this is something, without sort of trying to defend myself too much in the government I worked in, Rishi Sunak tried to address this quite a bit, actually, in his approach to the cost of living when he announced all these funding packages back in earlier this year. Disabled people were set to receive the highest amounts, actually, I think, from that money. But if there's a lot of truth in this story, which I'm sure there is for people around the country where they are struggling to this extent, then I'm sure the government, any compassionate government, would want to look at it again and see if they need any more funding to help them through, because these are the extreme ends of the angle of who
well, you
should be
would
helping.
hope that, but Jeremy Hunt does all these little interviews on Friday saying, well, we're going to have to look for more efficiencies across all government departments.
Well, yes,
and he's talking about kind of austerity doubled.
Yes, but with that, I mean, just talking of responsible government, the idea of that would be, I mean, you don't like austerity, and I mean, who does? No. But if you use that money from us to help those people who needed the money even more, I mean, it's about reallocation, isn't it?
It is, but what we've seen and what I don't necessarily hear is that the cap on bankers' bonuses is being introduced, that actually you could change that 45p tax rate and add a penny. Why not? If you're earning 150 grand, you can probably spare an extra penny on every pound. If you're earning 19 grand and looking after a disabled child and working part-time, it really makes a difference. I was on GB News a few weeks back with another guest, and he said, "Oh well, it's pennies. The 45 million pounds that would make a difference to the higher rate." And I thought, if you actually distribute that to the people who are really struggling the most, it would make a huge difference. An extra tenner a week would make a difference. And he was so far from the reality of what people's lives are actually like. It didn't make any sense to him. £10, what's that? 2 coffees. And you go, no, £10 is the difference between being able to buy your kids school shoes or not skipping dinner tonight.
Yeah, or eat a meal.
Well, it is, but it's that whole point of not making taxes punitive, isn't it? Which is...
But you can't... I really, really want to protest against the trickle-down idea.
No, well, yeah, it trickled...
If rich people earn more money, eventually the poor people will get a bit
Trickle-down has
extra.
been proved not to work, but also you don't want to stifle... A, you don't want to stifle ambition, but B, I mean, as you acknowledged earlier on, we mentioned it, there is a big argument if you want to... Now, I don't know how you do it, but, you increase money into the exchequer from tax revenue... with lower taxes, not with higher taxes, because people try to... I mean, it's the whole flatter taxes principle.
But it depends which taxes.
Yes, it does.
You have to be smart about it. And fundamentally, and I think this is something that Jack and I do agree on, growth has to be the driver. You can't print money. But that is reliant on a government that has a clear direction of travel, that can actually set out regulation and policy that makes sense, that is coherent, laws that are well thought through, so that all that private sector investment can actually come into the country because they're confident of the landscape that they're investing in. Yeah. And that was fundamentally one of the massive failures of Boris Johnson's government, there was all, OK, we're going to have a business white paper, we're going to have an energy paper. And you've got investors going, we'd love to invest in renewables. We've got money and we're waiting for opportunities to invest. And it was as clear as mud for them. And so they're going to go somewhere else.
Well, I'll tell you what, we have now sorted out all problems of the UK government for you with Jack Sellers and Mariana Hotter. And we'll, I don't know, which country should we solve and fix next in the next hour? There you go, problem solved.
We'll see you in the next
Happy
hour.
days.
Thank you.
Let's do Russia next.
Let's do oh no, I might take
don't
more
get
than
into
one
that
paper
now.
review. It is 7:46. Let's bring you up to date with all the stories.
And a Russian news agency has claimed that at least 11 people have been killed and 15 wounded at a military training ground in southern Russia. The unconfirmed reports quote Russia's defense ministry as saying 2 people opened fire on volunteers training to fight in Ukraine. The 2 assailants have also died.
The government is pressing ahead with legal measures to keep Britain moving during strikes. The legislation will introduce minimum service levels when transport workers take industrial actions. Unions criticising that, many saying it would be unworkable.
Suella Braverman has unveiled plans for a major crackdown on climate protests. The Home Secretary says it will give the police new powers to take a more proactive approach to protests, with some of the measures specifically targeted at the tactics used by some environmental groups.
And Camilla has been pictured surrounded by Paddington bears and other bears. They've been left, as you'll know, by members of the public outside the palace and Windsor Castle after Queen Elizabeth passed away. The palace says the toys have all been cleaned and they will now be given to Bernardos.
Now, approximately 30,000 out-of-hospital cardiac arrests happen every year in the UK.
Sadly, less than 1 in 10 people survive, and performing CPR can more than double the chances of survival in some cases. But how do you do it?
Well, on Restart a Heart Day, which is today, St John's Ambulance volunteer Florence Streeter is here to show us how. And I'm going to get up and we're going to do this with you, I think.
Get yourself off that
Absolutely.
stool,
Come and
Ellie.
join me. OK. Hello. So this is our dummy. Does he have a name?
This is Annie. They're all called Annie.
Hi, Annie.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the training dummies that we use in all of our courses across the country. As it's Restart Our Heart Day, there are events all across the country where we'll be teaching local communities. And right now, I'll teach you. It's a little bit harder on the table, but we're going to make it work.
OK.
So you're going to place your arms out straight in front of you.
Yeah.
And you're going to keep your arms straight. So you're going to lock them.
Yeah.
Right or left-handed?
Right.
OK, so you're going to put this one out front and this one on top.
Yeah.
And lock your fingers like this.
OK.
And then we're going to place them straight in the middle of the chest, in line with the armpits, OK?
OK.
And then you're going to press hard and fast in the middle of the chest, about 1/3 of the depth of this Annie. OK? Do you want me to show you first?
OK, yeah, you demonstrate first.
OK, so we're going to press really, really hard. And you're going to do it really, really fast as well. We're going to do it to a beat of 120 a minute. So it can be a little bit helpful if we have a little song in our head. So if you know the words...
Staying Alive.
Yeah, that classic advert.
Yeah.
Or Nelly the Elephant, that works too.
OK.
Yeah,
OK.
absolutely.
Go on then, Ellie.
Right, here we go. So right hand out, left on top.
Yeah.
And you just kind of push... Oh, goodness,
Yeah.
that's really hard.
It's
Your arms
definitely a
straight.
workout. It's a lot harder when it's on a table in
I'm on
front
my
of you.
tippy toes, yeah.
So usually you'd have it on the floor in front of you and you'd be on your knees. So you can really put your weight into it because you've got to press very, very
And would
hard.
it be this heavy, like on a real person? This is a bit of a workout.
Well, I mean, 'cause
It is
I-
definitely a workout.
I don't think I'd be very good.
It is hard. I mean, one of the things which I think is scary to a lot of people is you can crack the ribs and things doing this, can't you?
You absolutely can, yeah. However, know that you're not doing something wrong by doing that. Some people, especially if they're a little bit older, that's more likely. However, you're applying the correct force. You're not doing anything wrong by doing that. And they're not going to feel the pain of that. They're going to be very grateful that you're doing it.
How do you distinguish between when you should be doing the heart and when you need to be putting air into the lungs?
So at the moment, the advice is to just continuously do compressions.
Right.
You'll have called an ambulance and they'll be on the way to you, so they'll be able to provide oxygen when they get there, but you should just completely continue with doing.
And how long do you do this for? Just like...
I'm getting
there's
tired.
2
reasons that you would stop. Either they've suddenly started talking to you again and they no longer need CPR, However, that's very unlikely. But if you're too tired and you physically can't do it anymore, then you could stop. But likely someone will take over from you. So whilst we're waiting for the ambulance, you guys could swap places, or the ambulance service will take over from you when they arrive.
I see. And is this a good pace? So just as quick as you?
A little bit quicker.
Oh, really? Oh, dear. Stephen, I'd be very bad. If you were on the floor, I'd be very bad.
You would be very bad. I mean, it's worth pointing out, because I was in St John's ambulance back in the day.
Were
And we
you?
had an Annie and all the rest of it. You should never practice this on someone whose heart is beating properly, should you?
Absolutely. You would do a lot of damage if it's an alive person, and it would be very, very painful. However, these are the perfect tool to practice on.
It's funny because it's one of these things, we see it all the time on movies, don't we? And I wonder if that's helpful or not, because of course when you see them on the movies, they're sort of doing what Ellie's doing now, and obviously their arms are bending and they're not properly compressing because they can't do it. But does that give us the wrong impression of what we should actually do under the circumstances?
Perhaps, yeah. The best thing for you would be to watch an instructional video of someone doing it online, or pop along to one of the events today that teach you how to do it and really have a go yourself.
So what's the reason that you don't, or you're not advised to do mouth to mouth?
So we stopped doing it during COVID, but also it can be quite scary for some people. If this was someone that you saw collapse in the street, not everyone's really comfortable doing it on someone they don't know. And actually, it's the compressions that give the biggest chance of survival. We naturally have a lot of leftover oxygen in our lungs, and so as long as we're keeping that flowing around the body, which is what CPR is doing, then we can really improve the chances of someone.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, you hope to goodness that you never have to do this on people. But when you look at the figures of people who are having cardiac arrest, I mean, it's scary how common it is.
It is, yeah, absolutely. A quarter of deaths in the UK are caused by cardiac-related illnesses. But luckily, it's one that you can actually do quite a lot about. So many people are scared of performing CPR, and actually just having a go is just the most important thing. Like you said, you'd probably be a little bit scared to do it, but actually, you're not going to do it wrong. And doing something is a lot better than doing nothing.
That's a relief. So it's actually quite difficult to get it wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what would you say to people that are watching perhaps at home and haven't been able to try this? Where can they come and do this? Where can they get themselves familiar?
Yeah, so if you have a look, if you're free today, then you can go along to one of the events. If you just Google Restart a Heart or have a look on the St John Ambulance website, there's loads of events happening all across the country in universities, community halls and things like that. But if you can't do that, you can book onto a first aid course, or you can just watch a video online. As much as it's amazing to practice in person, if you're not able to, just having an awareness of how to do it is the most important thing.
How do we distinguish whether someone's having a cardiac arrest or a heart attack?
So with a heart attack, that is a blockage in one of the arteries. But the most important thing is that person's going to be alert. They're going to be conscious the whole time, just in a lot of pain, but they'll still be talking to you. However, with a cardiac arrest, they're going to be completely unresponsive the whole time. They can't talk to you, and they won't be breathing. So you'll know the difference for sure.
Right.
And it's in a cardiac arrest, like Annie.
Yes.
When we would
do
this, right?
Yeah.
And what about, because it's interesting doing that, if you had a choice between this or the, or what do you call them, the electric paddle? Oh, you've got one there.
Yeah.
I mean, now they're springing up in a lot of places now, and they're very good because they tell you themselves what to do, don't they?
They do.
Which is better?
So you kind of want a combination of both. You're going to start CPR straight away because most people don't happen to have a defibrillator in their homes. And the ambulance service that you'll have called will try and arrange for one to be delivered to you, or they'll tell you, if there's two of you there, to go and collect the nearest one. There's something called the circuit, which lists all of the ones all across the UK, and that will tell you where the nearest one is. So someone will start CPR, and in the meantime, someone will go and get the defibrillator. So CPR prolongs life, but the defibrillator can restart it.
Right, and of course, I mean, the advantage with the defibrillators now is you open the box, you put it, and they literally tell you what to do step by step.
They absolutely do, yeah. So you can't get it wrong. There's pictures on it, and it shows you exactly where to pop the pads, and it guides you through the process. So you're not going to accidentally shock someone that doesn't need it or anything like that.
Yeah.
So people shouldn't be afraid of CPR or using these.
Absolutely, that's the key message.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's amazing. Actually, it's amazing to see this in action. It's really good.
I'm really glad I've learnt this. Yeah.
You have. I don't know if I'd trust you quite.
No, I
a bit
don't
more
know.
practice.
If I put my elbows into
it
it,
is a lot
it's
easier
quite
when it's on
good.
the floor. Yeah, you've got
Yeah.
to keep your arms stretched like that, and it's
What
more
do you
of a
think of
rocking
my
motion.
technique?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I wasn't doing rocking.
no.
Yeah, that's for
We'll
sure.
get you.
We'll
trained
get there,
up.
won't we?
Yeah.
Laura, thank you very much indeed. And any of you who are in St John's Ambulance, you all do a sterling
Yes,
job.
you do.
It's incredible.
Florence,
thank you
so
very much
much.
indeed.
Thanks.
That is it for this hour. We've got the weather heading your way and then all the top stories in just a sec.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking blustery, with showers becoming confined to the far north. Elsewhere, mostly dry. Let's take a look at the details.
Well, across the south and west, dry, plenty of sunshine this morning, although some cloud will spread across the region later.
A dry start across the south and east with plenty of sunshine. However, cloud will move across the region from the south during the morning.
Now, it's going to be a fine and dry start with a fair amount of sunshine during the morning in Wales. Cloud, though, will increase from the south by late morning.
The Midlands will be fine and dry with prolonged sunny spells for all during the morning. However, cloudier skies will spread northwards from late morning. Winds mostly light but becoming slightly breezier into the afternoon.
To the northeast of England, then, it's going to be dry with prolonged sunny spells. Slightly cloudier in the far west with some patchy rain around. Winds mostly light, but they will increase.
Rather windy with showers continuing to affect the north and west of Scotland during the morning, but those easing somewhere into the afternoon. Elsewhere, dry with decent sunny spells.
For Northern Ireland, dry. Lots of sunshine at first, but skies will turn hazy from mid-morning. Outbreaks of cloud and rain arriving during the afternoon.
Cloud and rain accompanied with strong winds will spread north and east during the afternoon and evening, and that is how your weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
The Chancellor has admitted mistakes were made in the mini-budget, and as a result, some taxes will have to go up.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Sunday the 16th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie.
Of course, we're live across the whole of the UK. We're on your TV, your radio, online, so wherever you are and whatever you're up to, actually, you can take us with you.
Here are your top stories this morning. The new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, says Liz Truss's administration made mistakes. and that there are difficult decisions ahead. He plans to release a medium-term finance plan to be unveiled on the 31st of October, which he calls a proper budget.
Well, meanwhile, the Bank of England is warning interest rate rises could be bigger than previously thought. This, as Andrew Bailey says, a stronger response may be needed to fight inflation.
The Queen Consort Camilla has been pictured alongside Paddington bears and other teddies. The toys were left at royal residencies in memory of the late Queen Elizabeth and will be sent to Bernardo's charity.
We'd love to hear from you this morning, even if it's just, as Thomas has done, to say, I've always wondered what's on the papers that you're always shuffling. All your views, Thomas.
All your views. And there's loads of them.
Thousands of them. So keep them coming through. Join in the conversation. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Now, the Chancellor has admitted the government went too far too fast with the mini-budget plans to grow the economy.
In a statement released last night, Jeremy Hunt admitted that it won't be an easy road ahead, but maintained that his focus will be growth underpinned by stability.
Now, he's also suggested that tax rises could form part of a painful fiscal package designed to restore market confidence in the UK.
Well, let's get more reaction now from GB News' political reporter, Catherine Forster. Good morning to you, Catherine. I mean, you just need to look at the papers in front of us now. More and more Conservative MPs laying into Liz Truss. I mean, suggestions here that Tories want Big Ben, that is indeed Ben Wallace, for Prime Minister. And yesterday we were talking about that dual ticket of Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt.
Yes, the plotting is certainly still going on and getting more so. And if Liz Truss thought that in getting rid of Kwasi Kwarteng and bringing in Jeremy Hunt, which she thinks is reaching out, he's obviously pursuing a very different approach, that was going to make her troubles go away. Unfortunately, she seems to be very much mistaken this morning. Now, she's at checkers with Jeremy Hunt thrashing through the details. They're obviously due to lay out the medium-term fiscal plan still on Halloween, but she's been writing in The Sun today, essentially sort of saying that nothing has changed, heard that before, saying still going for growth, OK, we're going to get there in a different way, still going on about the anti-growth coalition. Jeremy Hunt, obviously on the airwaves yesterday, writing in The Telegraph today, being very, very clear what he thinks mistakes were made in the mini-budget, saying very difficult decisions, some taxes will have to rise, public spending, some cuts potentially. So a very, very different message from him. And a lot of people now, it looks like the 1p cut in income tax will be the latest thing to get changed. And a lot of people now are sort of asking, what really is the point of Liz Truss if most of what she stood for now seems to be being removed?
Well, absolutely. Everything that was her mandate for getting the leadership has now gone, pretty much.
It does seem that way. I mean, obviously, she's got these plans for supply-side reforms that we haven't heard the details of yet, but tax cutting was very central and really the key reason probably to how she was elected by 80,000 Conservative Party members on this promise. Tax cuts equal growth. Now, she's still saying we're going to get the growth, but most of the tax cuts have gone. Now, the Bank of England are saying that, they and Jeremy Hunt are talking the same language. It may reassure the markets. It may reassure some of her MPs, but many of them are now deeply, deeply unhappy. Lots of them feel, well, Rishi Sunak, who of course ran for the leadership, was previously Chancellor, has been vindicated. Wouldn't it be better to get him in? Others saying Ben Wallace, rumours of up to 100 letters of no confidence have gone to Graham Brady. Now, I should say, no one except for Graham Brady, the chair of the 1922 committee, knows how many letters have gone in. And in any case, under the current rules, she's safe. But they can change.
Well, he doesn't know he's on holiday at the minute.
He's on holiday in Athens, coming back tomorrow.
Even he doesn't know. Catherine, thank you very much indeed. Let's get some analysis from the political editor at The Express Online, David Maddox. Morning to you, David. I mean, look, is there a sense then, because everything, as Catherine was saying, everything she's been elected on is now being reversed, basically. Does she have to go?
It's just very, very hard to see how she survives. I mean, I was getting calls yesterday, all through yesterday, even though it was my day off yesterday, from people saying that they'd be amazed if she's still Prime Minister by the end of play on Monday. And it's absolutely right to say that her entire kind of reason for being elected as leader, her entire kind of tax-cutting policy has now been ditched completely. And essentially, she's installed the anti-growth coalition into the Treasury again. So it's remarkable, really. I've never seen a fall from grace so fast from being made Prime Minister.
So, David, there is a lot of plotting and scheming going on in the front pages of the newspapers this morning, already talking about her replacement. But is this fixable with a replacement Prime Minister? It looks as though the Conservative Party is imploding. Would it not be better at this point to look towards a general election?
Well, yes, unless you're a Conservative MP, because the best case polls for them, in fact, probably the best case poll for them is the tracker poll we do for the Express with Techni UK, which only puts them 24 points behind Labour as opposed to 34 points, which I think was your poll at the end of last week. And that would leave the Conservatives with about 70 seats. It would be the worst result in the entire history of the oldest political party in the world. And it's just... so they'll want the 2 years. The Conservative MPs will want the 2 years to try and re-establish themselves, at least minimise a defeat. I think, there's certainly a lot of names in the hat to replace her. And I think that's the main discussion. I wrote a piece yesterday, but the problem they have is that they want a coronation. They don't want another leadership contest. And they're struggling to find a unity candidate. I mean, Ben Wallace is certainly a name. I don't think Rishi Sunak's possible because he's just been rejected by the members. I think the one to look out for, though, from what I was being told yesterday, is Jeremy Hunt. Some people are saying he's effectively already Prime Minister. And he's now dictating policy, and he seems to be the one person that both sides of a party, or all six sides of a party, depending on your view, can unite around.
But could that actually work? I mean, he got kicked out in the first round of the election by members of Parliament, didn't he? I mean, surely he's the last person they would actually want in when they had no interest in him getting into number 10 over the summer.
Yes, he did come second to Boris just a few years ago. I mean, but it's not quite as bad as being rejected by the members of a party. I think that's the big problem with Rishi. Rishi would be the obvious person in many ways, especially as his economic policy and arguments, which lost him the election, funnily enough, have been largely vindicated. But, the idea of going to members and saying, oh, by the way, the guy you didn't want, we're going to install him as leader. I just don't think it's a non-starter. I mean, people are telling me they'd rip up their membership cards and refuse to go and campaign if that happened. Essentially, if Jeremy Hunt gets it or Ben Wallace gets it, they're a short-term solution. They take them through to the next election, and they're probably out afterwards. I mean, it's unlikely they'd win an election anyway. So, they don't have the long-term ambition that somebody like a Penny Mordaunt or a Suella Braverman would have as well. So, it's difficult though. There isn't an obvious or easy candidate for them to get around and to crown as leader, and that might well save this trust.
But we talked, David, about the idea of the people not standing for another leader without a general election. Now, obviously, if the Tories bring in another leader, there is no obligation for that leader to then call a general election, but the pressure from opposition parties, and one would imagine, actually, a lot of discontent from your average everyday voter, would that make it inevitable? Would there just have to be some action taken?
Morally, they probably should be. Constitutionally, they can hold on for the next 2 years. Of course, the opposition parties want an election because they'd win it easily. Labour would romp home with 400 seats, the biggest majority in history at the moment. Yeah, so I'd love to have an election. Constitutionally, the Conservatives, it was a Conservative Party that was elected, not a Prime Minister. We don't yet have a presidential system, but I agree. I mean, personally, I can't see how they can, change Prime Minister twice and avoid an election. Even Theresa May, back in 2017, felt that she needed to go for an election after replacing David Cameron, sort of midterm, if you like. So it's going to be difficult for them, but I think the Tories need a little bit of time to re-establish themselves and actually re-establish the idea that they're competent, particularly with the economy. I mean, we did a poll a couple of weeks ago which shows that Labour are now trusted more on the economy by 2 to 1 than the Conservatives, which is unheard of, really. It's just amazing.
David, thanks very much indeed. I just want to return to Catherine Forster, because we're so focused on and quite rightly so, as to what's happening right within our own borders. But actually, this is having an impact internationally as well.
It is. US President Joe Biden has been on the campaign trail, and he was at an ice cream shop in Oregon, and he said it was predictable that the Prime Minister had to row back on her tax plans. And in fact, I wasn't the only one who thought it was a mistake. I disagree with the policy, the idea of cutting taxes on the super wealthy. And, the tax cut on the top 1% was reversed pretty quickly, but that cut through, didn't it? That messaging cut through. The energy price cap that's going to benefit everybody, really, they threw that away almost. It's massively expensive. They've got almost no credit for that. So internationally too, I'm sure this comment will not be appreciated, but people all around the world are wading into this.
Yeah. OK. Catherine, thank you very much indeed. What do you think about it all? I'd love to get your thoughts. Loads of views coming through at the moment.
Yep, Dean says, I voted Conservative in the last 3 general elections. What I've seen so far, I would not trust Liz Truss to run a chip shop in a potato field. She's just not good enough, says Dean. But Tony in Suffolk, and this is the great thing about GB News, I mean, we welcome all views. Tony says, please give Liz, our Prime Minister, a chance.
Yeah. Linda says, I switched on this morning to hear anti-Boris posts being read out. Boris had the pandemic to deal with straight after taking office, so it's unfair to criticise. Carl says, it looks inevitable, a change in leadership. I think he means the Conservatives blew it when they got rid of Boris, and they're way too pig-headed to admit they got it wrong. And Vaughan says, I am genetically conservative. Never heard that kind of phrase before, Vaughan, but I get what you mean. Yeah, but I cannot vote for more of this government. After 12 years, they've lost control of everything. Police, education, NHS, immigration, and now the economy.
And Steve says, Hunt has cleverly positioned himself to be Prime Minister. Is this House of Cards being acted for real? That's certainly what's in front of us on the newspapers here. Lots of talk, lots of plotting, lots of scheming about who could potentially replace Liz Truss. I think she's only been in a position for, 40 days, is it now?
Something like that.
Something like that. It's an incredibly short period of time. Do let us know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk.
You know something's wrong when all the Tory supporting papers are actually very against you. It's turning, and it just because it seems unsustainable at the moment.
But like you said, she had that mandate for growth, for low taxes, and that is all being turned around. So, I mean, what does she stand for?
Well, now we're looking at tax rises.
Tax rises, exactly.
Let me neck. Well, look, as the new Chancellor scrambles to undo many of Kwasi Kwarteng's economic proposals, one thing that's yet to be mentioned are plans to raise benefits in line with earnings or in line with inflation. It's got to be one of the two.
Now, if this does happen, the poorest households, including many pensioners, could take a £1,000 knock that will plunge many more into poverty.
Let's talk to Samantha Gould, Head of Campaigns at Now Pensions. Good to see you this morning. Look, we still have no clarification, do we, as to whether they are going up in line with inflation or in line with earnings. In real terms, what would it mean for the average pensioner if it was in line with earnings?
So the problem is with people who are claiming pension-related benefits is that they're typically out of work. So actually they have very limited ability to actually increase their earnings. So the positive news, and I'd like to start with the positive, is that the the budget did confirm that the triple op would be reinstated in April next year, which means that people who are claiming the state pension will have their income aligned to inflation. So that is hugely positive. Obviously, that was paused throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, which has obviously hugely affected pensioners in receipt of their state pensions at the moment.
And already, I mean, we see so many and we hear so many stories of pensioners living in poverty. And now we have this cost of living crisis, we have an energy crisis. We're talking about being £1,000 poorer. I mean, it's going to plunge so many more into poverty.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Age UK's recent stats have showed that there's currently 2 million pensioners that are living in poverty today. And that number does actually increase by over 200,000 every year. So it's a huge, huge number. And the majority of those living in poverty in pension age are women and people from ethnic minority groups. So we've actually done a lot of campaigning around the pension inequality gap and the gender pensions gap, because women reaching retirement have around £138,000 less than men when they come to their retirement. So this is obviously a huge issue that we have in the UK. And, you know, the Resolution Foundation's report, which I know you've been discussing this morning, is showing that actually the number of people in the UK living in poverty is set to increase by 2024, with 1 in 5 expected to be living in poverty. So we've seen a huge increase in the amount of food banks that have been opened as well, since the pandemic, but obviously throughout the cost of living crisis, you know, finances have been squeezed, and particularly hard-working families. So a lot of working families are really struggling to be able to afford, you know, the increase in energy prices, the increase in food prices, and obviously the, you know, petrol and the current mortgage crisis that we have as well.
Yeah, everyone's struggling on anything, on everything. Samantha, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Loads of pensioners getting in touch with us this morning, and a lot of them saying living hand to mouth. I wonder what impact the energy price bill cap £2,500 for the next 2 years is going to mean. I mean, that should improve the situation in the long term. It still meant your prices probably went up in October, start of this month, but it means they're not going to increase any more as long as you keep your usage down. And they could, I mean, potentially they could drop. So what impact is that? Does it take away some of the worry, at least, that you're not going to be faced with another huge rise in January and another huge rise in April?
And it also, I think what's really interesting is how pension savings are going to be affected, because it must be very, very difficult to think so much about your future when you're worrying so much about your today, your present situation. And the reality is stopping your pension contributions will have a knock-on effect. I mean, it's important to always think about the future, but very, very difficult when everyday life is just getting more and more expensive and so many families are feeling the pinch, feeling the squeeze. Very, very difficult.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? If people are holding back on pension contributions now when they're of working age, which is understandable, but that is storing up big problems further down the line unless you can then top it up. I tell you what, it's a perfect storm. It is a perfect storm. I don't think it's right that everyone blames the government for it. I've got to be honest, because this is an international crisis. You can blame the government for how it's handled it. But it's an international crisis that is going on, and quite how we all deal with it as individuals, I just don't know. But it's very, very difficult. Any thoughts? GBviews at gbnews.uk. We're going to take a short break. Let's have a look at the weather for you.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking blustery, with showers becoming confined to the far north. Elsewhere, mostly dry. Let's take a look at the details.
Well, across the south and west, dry, plenty of sunshine this morning, although some cloud will spread across the region later.
A dry start across the south and east with plenty of sunshine. However, cloud will move across the region from the south during the morning.
Now, it's going to be a fine and dry start with a fair amount of sunshine during the morning in Wales. Cloud, though, will increase from the south by late morning.
The Midlands will be fine and dry with prolonged sunny spells for all during the morning. However, cloudier skies will spread northwards from late morning. Winds mostly light but becoming slightly breezier into the afternoon.
To the northeast of England, then, it's going to be dry with prolonged sunny spells. Slightly cloudier in the far west with some patchy rain around. Winds mostly light, but they will increase.
Rather windy with showers continuing to affect the north and west of Scotland during the morning, but those easing somewhere into the afternoon. Elsewhere dry with decent sunny spells.
For Northern Ireland, dry. Lots of sunshine at first, but skies will turn hazy from mid-morning. Outbreaks of cloud and rain arriving during the afternoon.
Cloud and rain accompanied with strong winds will spread north and east during the afternoon and evening, and that is how your weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. You're watching Breakfast with Stephen Elliott. I'd love a lovely, relaxing break, you know. It's time to put your feet up, just have a swig of tea, have a bit of a breather. But what do you have to do? Photo session.
Oh, I know. This is me.
All
Sorry.
over Instagram.
That's what I do. I love him. That's what it is. I like to... When I'm here, it's like I like to take home a little souvenir.
So we have a pose like a
of our time
like
together.
a prom date, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what you said. It looks like prom pictures. I'll share one on Twitter in a moment. But anyway, this just made me laugh, Sian. Good morning to you. So I don't know if you were just watching, but I just did a CPR demo, didn't I? And it didn't go very well. I'm not the best, but anyway.
No, to be fair, this is a very high table, and you'd only do it on the floor.
Yeah, and it was a workout. It's very early still. Anyway, Sian says, Ellie, I'm a nurse, and you have just lost your patient. With that compression, she's gone. Still, I love the show, and a big smiley face emoji. So thanks, Sian.
Yeah.
And I
know you were.
I don't think it came naturally to me. Let's just say that much. And I got all my hand placement wrong. You've got to.
I mean, you weren't even. It wasn't even strong enough to need bread. That.
Do you not think?
No.
I thought it started quite well.
It started
I couldn't
all right.
keep up. Honestly, if it was down to me, they'd be long dead. I'm sorry.
You're right, Sian. You wouldn't want her in an emergency.
No, you wouldn't. I could help you emotionally. I could chat to you through it, but I don't think... Maybe you'd be better at the compressions.
I used to do it. I was in St John's Ambulance, so I used to do it. We had an Annie and used to do all that sort of thing. But it has been a long time since I had
And is it scary?
It is scary because you are really pushing down.
Oh,
and you have to, and you have to be aware that you are likely to, as you start, you're going to hear the cracks as the ribs break and all that sort of thing.
And do you crack ribs? Is that what's happening?
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
But it's like, well, that's the least of your problems.
Of course,
If you're in that situation. But it does. It's properly scary.
No, I bet it is.
I mean, I've never done it in real life, but I mean, can you imagine? It's going to be properly like you've got to really go for it.
Yeah.
Really go for it.
Yeah, and you're racing against that adrenaline, I suppose. But what Florence was saying from St John's Ambulance was, do not be afraid. It's really simple to do. You can watch the videos online, can't you? You can go along to first aid sessions. It's very, very simple to do, and you can't get it wrong, she says.
Well, it's like, even if the sort of thing is, it's better, whatever you do is likely to be better than nothing.
Yes.
To be perfectly honest. So you just got to give it a go.
And you need to do it in time to staying alive, staying alive. So it's a lot faster than you think it is.
Yeah.
I've learnt a lot this morning.
Yeah.
Look, every day's a school day.
120 beats a minute.
Yeah, very good.
There you go.
Very, very good.
Now, let's talk about eco-activists. Should we? Extinction Rebellion, yes, they are back. They're staging 3 days of climate protests in London this weekend. There's going to be a march on Westminster this afternoon.
Well, the group are demanding urgent government action on the climate crisis.
It follows 12 days of protests, resulting in widespread disruption and vandalism.
Well, GB News' South West of England reporter Jeff Moody went to see the protests for himself.
Security! You can hear the disbelief in the man's voice as he calls for security. 2 protesters throwing tomato soup at one of the most precious pieces of art in the world. They want to just stop oil, but the only oil here is in the paint. Last week it was cheese. They poured milk over the dairy counter at Selfridges.
Do you guys not intervene? You don't? We're not allowed.
And this is what's angering so many. We're not allowed to stop them, say Selfridges staff. Even when they throw paint at Scotland Yard itself. For many, the police's lightness of touch is a sign of weakness. Rumours abound the police have been handing out cups of tea. Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rawley is defending his force's lack of force.
I haven't seen the cups of tea point, and I hope we haven't been doing that because I don't think we should be. I agree with you. That's not our responsibility. Are these protests? Are they currently, or are they heading towards causing serious disruptions to life of the community? And over the last 11 days, all of those partners have been of view that it doesn't cause serious disruption.
Many are saying, if this isn't serious disruption, then what is? They glue themselves to the street. They block roads. An ambulance forced to find another route. Just Stop Oil say these protests are the only way to get their message across.
I think we've seen with all the strike action that's happening, you don't get anything by just sitting on the sidelines and sitting and wishing. Yeah. You have to make it unignorable, and we have been ignored for so long.
But it's not just oil. Insulate Britain out too. Here gluing themselves to the pavement outside Parliament to disrupt Prime Minister's question time. This weekend, the turn of Extinction Rebellion. A mass sit-in, events and speakers, culminating in a march on Westminster this afternoon. They say the government's policies are unjust. They say the climate crisis is being ignored. They say they're aiming for 100,000 on the streets by 2023. Today, they're marching from Hyde Park to Parliament Square in what they're calling a show of strength. Many now wondering who has the strength to stop them before someone gets seriously hurt or worse. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Don't know what to think. My friend Sylvia, right, who is sadly no longer with us, she was well in her 80s when she died, actually, a few years ago. But she was always on protest, but for animal rights stuff. Animal rights was her big thing. And she was a protester well into her 80s.
Wow.
Huge respect, loads of love for Sylvia. But with some of this lot, and the glue, I don't know if Sylvia ever glued herself to anything, I hope not. But I just sort of think, well, just leave them there.
Yeah.
They glue themselves there. You can't, once you're super glued down, it's a heck of a job. I just say leave them there. I haven't got the patience for it at the moment, and I don't know if that's wrong of me.
Well, with everything else going on, isn't it? It's a lot, and it's difficult to see the reaction. I think that's what's difficult. It's in the shops. I mean, you heard there in the report from Jeff Moody, Selfridges staff couldn't get involved. They've been told not to get involved. So you're just watching these people throwing milk and cream around the shop. I mean, it's anarchy, isn't it?
Yeah.
And even Alice Porter was outside Westminster the other day, and police were just kind of sitting with the protesters. So
that's
they're almost
ridiculous.
protected. They're almost protected in a way.
Maybe I should be a bit more proactive and say, you know, if you want to achieve change, then you've got to do X, Y, and Z and be all for it. But at the minute, as I say, I just have my patience has gone now. Maybe it's a sign of getting old.
Well, is this the right way to do it? I don't think many people disagree with them and their cause and what they're fighting for. But ultimately? But is this the right way to go about it? Is this how you keep people on side?
Are they achieving
I'm not sure it is.
I would say, are you achieving anything, you lot? And I would think the answer to that is no.
Well, let us know what you think. Got lots of you talking yesterday, and I'm sure it will again today. gbnews@gbnews.uk.
Being a pain in the rear end half the time and not much else. But anyway, that's grumpy old Dixon for you this morning. We've got much more to come.
Much more to come with that.
Oh, yes, I'll be much more. I'll be grumpier during all the papers which are heading away in just a moment.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It is 8:33. Oh, Mariana Hot is chunking away already. Blimey heck. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. Good morning to you.
Right, let's have a look at today's front pages, which are all leading with the same lines in the Sunday Times. Let's go to that first. Jeremy Hunt is set to delay the penny cut to income tax.
Sunday Express says rebel Tories are plotting to topple Liz Truss.
According to The Observer, senior Tories will hold talks on a rescue mission this week.
For the Sunday Mirror, it says the PM could be added number 10 in a matter of days. I'll tell you what we're going to do is we're going to go through the papers now with former Special Advisor to Boris Johnson, Jack Sellers, and anthropologist, that woman off of Time Team, at Mariana Hotter. But what we're going to do, and thankfully you've had a change of heart, is we're lightening it up a little bit for this, because it's been so blooming heavy the last couple, but importantly so.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a look at some of the lighter stories in the papers, give you a little bit of a breather. Mary-Anne, we'll start with the Sunday Times, should we? And are you a feeder? Are you a feeder?
I don't know. I'm definitely an emotional eater.
Your husband's quite on the trim side, isn't he? He's not.
No,
Is he piled it on a bit since I last saw him?
No, he's
piled
about
on
the
the
same.
pounds?
He's about the same. Let's talk about the story.
It's all about feeding.
No, you're right. The question is, so if you're an emotional eater, imagine you're feeling a bit upset. You've had a really stressful day at work. You come home. What do? Do you put some music on? Do you dance, or do you grab a chocky bicky? If you're a grab a chocky bicky person, then you're an emotional eater because that's the little thing that will make you just get you through the next half hour or whatever. So, if you are that person, but you're actually trying to not eat the chocky bicky yourself, watch out for the fact that you go, have a chocky bicky.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're actually just passing on the emotional eating to someone else. And you get a bit of the vicarious, you get a little bit of knock-on kind of pleasure, not only that you didn't eat the chocky bicky, but that you're watching someone else that you love eat the chocky bicky.
So you're an emotional eater, but that's why your husband's put on the timber since I last saw him.
So that's right. That's why he's yeah.
Oh, poor fella.
That's all right. It's all right. We're all about positivity. It's all about part of a balanced, healthy diet. He's not, just for the record.
Oh, no, he's
not. Just maligning him on national TV.
I'm an anomaly in this because I did a bit of a weight loss thing last year, and I consider myself, actually, me and Miriam were talking about this beforehand, I consider myself a stress eater, and my go-to is a pack of chocolate digestives or a cup of tea. Well, I will clean out the whole packet, given any time.
Wow.
Yeah. But when I was doing my sort of weight loss last year, I wouldn't say I was sort of, passing it on to my girlfriend, the emotional sort of, encouraging her to eat and, all that sort of, like, Nans are classic sort of, making you want to eat, and they serve you massive portions, and you have your main meal, then like 2 packs of Jaffa cakes afterwards,
I think I'm like that. I'm like a inner Irish granny or something. I'm feeding people.
Well, how much weight did you lose, Jack?
Just over a stone. But I think the actual weigh in, the pounds and stones, the measurements, I think are actually very deceiving, because obviously in certain occasions your weight won't drop by a lot, but you're actually, because you'll be gaining muscle or whatever.
Yeah, you look quite different.
It's the appearance which is the important thing. So whenever you're doing this sort of thing, take photos at the beginning, take photos every week.
Hang on,
throughout.
wait. It's not about appearance. It's about how you feel.
And healthiness.
It's about your feeling of health, because it's not about how you look.
I agree.
Yeah.
Though I'm back on Slimming World again.
Are you? Does that work?
Oh, God, yeah.
All right.
But it's just maintaining. It's maintaining.
Yeah,
I'm on a maintenance, which is the hard bit.
It's got to be
Lifestyle.
sustainable. Yeah, you've got to keep it up. It can't be something drastic where you starve yourself for 3 weeks, and because that's never going to last. You're not going to do that forever. So.
What did you do? Healthy eating?
It was healthy eating, but I upped my exercise massively, and I was doing very basics. If you get the basics right, but consistency is key. Get the basics right, and it helps. So I'm talking, aim for 10,000 steps a day, which a lot of people do anyway, but you won't believe how often many people don't actually achieve
Or
that.
if you're not doing so much, start small, even if it's 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's better than nothing, and your body will totally thank you for it. The other thing in this article is beware if someone's using food as a way of controlling you. So
people do that,
so the sabotage thing. So you go, I'm starting Slimming World, and your partner goes, I bought you some chocolates.
Yeah.
That's a bit of an alarm
nice.
signal.
Yeah.
Going, oh, it's all right, I love you. And you go,
Trying to sabotage you.
Trying to sabotage me.
Yeah.
So just check in with your own behaviour.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you don't even know you're doing it, because you go, well, Gran always got me Jaffa cakes as a sort of sign of love, but actually just sort of think about it.
It's not always love, though.
It's not always love.
Not always love.
No, it's not, no. Cheese, crisps and peanuts are my big failings.
And
they're my failings.
Everything in moderation.
Well, yeah,
Don't demonise. That's the trick.
Moderation is the problem.
Yeah. I find that if I don't have it in the house, then it doesn't tempt me.
Exactly. It's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Fat-free cottage cheese.
Is that what you...
There's only so much you can eat, isn't
You'd
it?
rather not bother.
It's quite tasty. It's all right. It's all right. You laugh all you want.
Do you know what I did the other day, though?
Oh, go on, then.
And this is going to be an advert for a treadmill now. I got a treadmill, like an under-the-sofa treadmill. It's like a motorised treadmill. So I just put on the Netflix and then I just start walking. I did 10,000 steps the other day just watching a couple of episodes.
That's good.
It's good, right? Don't even need to leave the house anymore.
Oh, no.
And then you can eat all the chocolate biscuits you like.
Big advocate for getting outside, connect with nature and actually get all the additional benefits.
But, Marianne, it's the dark and it's the cold, and I just think, now I've got no excuses. I can do it in the lounge now.
Oh, no.
Do it in my PJs.
You need your vitamin D, you need the bird song, you need the fresh air, you need the movement in the world.
I tell you, the last thing I would do is buy a treadmill.
You'd find it fun.
I would not.
Put on the music.
I definitely would not find it fun. Tell you now.
I'd pay good money to see you on that.
I tell you what.
I want to see you taking Ellie out for a
I do a lot of
walk,
walking, yeah.
And I want to see Ellie putting you on a treadmill.
Yeah,
Stephen, is it the running full stop? Do you enjoy running?
I don't run,
You
no.
just don't run full stop.
Don't run, no.
Because some people...
But I do a lot of walking.
Yeah.
But running enough isn't for me. I haven't got the knees for it.
No.
Ellie's probably, when she's on a treadmill like a loony, is probably watching The Crown, Jack.
Yes, The Crown, despite all the headlines across the papers today, mostly focusing on the politics of the day, the Telegraph and the Mail actually have got stories on the front page touching upon The Crown, which is due out, I believe, in November. This is not a plug, by the way.
Yeah.
But the latest, this series as a whole actually has had a bit of a convoluted history of controversy amongst how much it dramatises some of the scenes within it. But the most recent event is that John Major, ex-Prime Minister, has launched a bit of an attack on it, calling it labelling it as malicious nonsense. And so specifically, he's referring, so all the reports are around a scene where King Charles, who was Prince of Wales at the time, obviously, went to meet the Prime Minister, and apparently, according to The Crown, and this is what they sort of put in their show, was saying that the Queen should abdicate to make room for him. So John Major obviously has come out and really heavily condemned this. But I find this quite interesting because for John Major to get involved, he feels there's a bit of reputational risk for him here if this sort of gets carried away. But the Crown as a programme, I'm sure you'll know, it's not been short of any criticism for how much it dramatises things in the past. I mean, Miriam was discussing this before we come on. I only watched it up until the third series, I think, and it's obviously all predated me. We were like in the 50s, 60s, and there was links there about the Queen and who she was in love with and all this sort of stuff. And I don't know, but we're moving into a very tricky time for the Crown, with the Queen's passing, obviously being really relevant, but also the Crown now is entering the most recent decades, which was already going to cause controversy.
I think it's uncomfortable. I think it's too soon.
Yeah. No, it's horrible.
But there's a campaign, I should note, across some of the newspapers, and I think Oliver Dowden, when he was Culture Secretary, was saying this, that the Crown should come with a pre-warning, that a lot of it is dramatised.
But they do say that.
Yeah.
They do say, we're not pretending that this is historically accurate. Now enjoy the show. But the thing is, you can't help yourself. You can't help but be coloured by what you've watched because it's two, amazing actors who look exactly like the thing. And
especially when it's in...
amazing.
Yeah, and especially when it's in people's living memories. And Stephen, as you were saying yesterday, we're not in the room, but we know the historic events that happen. So that dialogue is filled in by the Crown.
Yeah.
And then it would lead, this is what Lady Isabella Hervey was on yesterday saying, people then believe that is the dialogue that took place, when in fact... Nobody was in those rooms apart from, the real people. Yeah.
Anyway, Mary-Anne was talking about healthy eating before, so now she's decided to pick the Sunday Mirror and chocolate.
Yes, all in the interest of balance.
Okay.
Page 28 of the Mirror.
Yes.
Robo-Choc. So this is the first chocolate bar that has been designed through artificial intelligence, analysing 1.5 million online posts about chocolate cravings. So they analysed them. They got a computer algorithm to work out what are the little...
What do we want out of our chocolate?
What are the factors that make the perfect chocolate bar? Oh. So, it's milk
chocolate...
Size,
obviously.
Size matters, yeah.
Milk chocolate, cookie crumbs...
Oh, yeah.
Nuts...
Yeah.
And it's 30% less sugar than conventional chocolate, but you won't taste the difference, apparently.
Yeah. No. Well,
and therefore... It's the perfect chocolate bar, apparently. I mean, not an ad. Don't know. Haven't eaten it. Might be terrible.
Is it actually being made then?
It's being made by a Finnish food firm, and it's going to be in shops next year, and it's going to be called The Bar.
Oh.
The Bar.
There you go. So you heard it here first. Oh, and it's going to be a recipe for 5 flavours.
Oh.
5 different flavours.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll try it.
Yeah, we've got it, haven't you?
Well, that's it.
You've got to be relevant, be modern, up to date with all the recent news. You've got to go out and try these things.
That's it.
Even if it takes 20 bars before you get an opinion.
Got to do your research. You'd be the right
all in one go.
Well, it's like Dairy Milk have just unveiled what their mystery flavours were, haven't they? They had 2 mystery flavours.
Did they?
And one of them apparently was rhubarb and custard. I mean, I wouldn't have known. It was very nice. There was a competition. You had to eat all the chocolate and then write in and say what you thought the flavours were. And then you could win $5,000 if you picked out the hat.
Oh, wow.
Well, apparently one was rhubarb and custard and one was like a blueberry muffin or something.
Did you get either of them right?
No.
Oh.
No, I don't know. They were very nice, though.
Stephen, before you started your job, did you have to declare an interest in the chocolate industry by any chance?
No. No. I received nothing for free, let me tell you, sadly.
My
there you go.
husband-
Oh yes, the chunky one. Yeah.
He's really into like really fancy single origin chocolate. That's his thing. Yeah. So he's like,
Expensive, isn't it?
It's so expensive. But he doesn't have many other kind of sins. He doesn't smoke, he doesn't drink, so he just goes full pelt with the really fancy chocolate. Whereas I'm all right with a fruit and nut.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all right.
We've got time for one quick one. So I think if we're on the theme of the royal family and food, why don't we look at the Queen's dogs, the corgis?
Yeah.
The Telegraph says they're the gift that keep on giving.
Yes, yeah, nice little story to end. Probably lots of interest in this. I know the public respond very warmly when it comes to the corgis, the Queen's famous pets. But so the Telegraph are not leading. Sorry, it's on page 3. But they're talking about how the corgis now are living with the Duchess of York, who shared a picture. And I would show it, but I'm sure your readers can go and buy a Telegraph and view that themselves. But the corgis seem to be in a good home, which is good. Obviously,
where are they? Who
with the
sorry.
Can we get a zoom in on this one?
Because I wasn't listening,
Good to be
Jack.
able to see. Can we zoom in? I'm not sure
So
we
the
can.
Queen's corgis, Mick and Sandy, now live with Fergie.
Well, they gave them to the Queen, didn't they?
Yeah. Prince Andrew gave
So
them.
now they've got them back.
Yeah, now they got them back. But
Oh, there we are.
The one vivid memory from the Queen's funeral for a lot of people was when they got to Windsor later in the day and the corgis were there on the side. Do you remember that?
Yes, and the
which- that was-
pony.
Yeah, with the
little
pony.
sad
Yeah.
pony.
Emma.
Is that the name of the pony?
Yeah, and for a lot of people, that was the moment they crumbled.
I saw this a lot on Twitter saying that was
Yep.
the moment it all sort of hit home with the corgis just sat there sort of waiting for the Queen who wasn't.
mum.
I was on the...
I wonder why they didn't have Prince Andrew posing with the corgis. That picture.
Yeah, well.
Stephen,
that's quite
it's supposed
obvious.
to be the light paper review.
Steve, that was meant to be a positive end.
Well, no, we've still got time to fill, actually. So let's
tell you about Yorkshire Ghost.
Yorkshire Ghost, please. I like a bit of spook.
The Daily Star is on a roll.
Is
I mean, if you want to buy a paper and not actually have your head filled with horrors,
Yeah.
buy the Star today. I mean, I never thought I'd recommend it, but page 20,
Right.
Yorkshire is the top for phantoms, the most spook sighting in that county. 787 sightings of things like headless horseman,
Right.
a headless coach driver. I'm assuming
Lots of
like a
headless.
coach and horses rather than an
Stagecoach.
actual, like, a bus. Yeah. Horse riders, snarling hounds and
Oh.
fairies.
Fairies.
Rutland,
Yes.
only 6 sightings.
Right.
So if you want to find a ghost, go to Yorkshire.
And
Any
do we
bit of
know
Yorkshire,
why-
North Yorkshire, West Yorkshire.
Do we know why Yorkshire? Why they're all hanging out there?
Well, you're going to have to ask the ghosts.
Yeah.
Well, Scarborough's got a big reputation for all things spooky, hasn't it? I can't remember why. Is it something to do with Frankenstein or Dracula
But I feel
or
like
something like that?
Yorkshire, you've got Vikings.
Yes.
I mean, who doesn't want to see a headless Viking marauding through Jorvik? You've got, the kind of wild, windswept moors where you could have, phantom hounds and you can have miry, misty creatures and kind of wandering, maidens going, I can't find my way through the mist. And then you've got some, really brilliant, good old houses where you can have, the kind of woman in black with no head or, a monk.
Yeah, to be fair, it makes sense. You couldn't see them rolling about in central London, really, could you? But I can imagine it on the moors, in the mist. I'm with you.
Me, being the uber realist I am, but what this actually means is I'm sure this is a sort of flourishing industry, actually. The sort of spooky sector where ghost hunters, the go to these areas.
Stephen.
If anything, this is very good PR for Yorkshire.
Well, yeah.
So you don't believe in ghosts, then, Jack?
Not that I can't ever say I've ever seen one, Ellie. So I'll
Get yourself to Yorkshire.
I'll be up there next weekend.
Yeah. No, you get those. You could stay in like haunted hotels and things, can't you? And then you have to get up at 4 a.m. and see what happens.
Yeah, and then do videos of can you hear me walking into a room and tapping windows and all this sort of stuff.
Stuff goes on,
There's a market for it. There's a market for it.
Good, safe, harmless fun.
You cynic. Jack, sort of thank you for that. You were marvellous, Marianne. Thanks very much indeed.
Oh, come on, that's mean.
No, I'm only joking.
Can't be mean.
That's fine, Stephen, I get it.
No, thank you, both of you. You've been wonderful this morning, both of you. Love it. Bit of feistiness in the morning.
Feistiness and a bit of fun to end
And a
with.
bit of
That's what
fun.
we like.
Yes.
Now, should we talk free school meals? Because for many children, they've been a lifeline to a healthy and balanced diet.
Well, the NHS's most senior paediatrician, Camilla Kingdon, has called for the government to provide free school meals to all children to address the country's profoundly disturbing food poverty rates.
Well, let's talk to Professor Nina Modi, who's former president of the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health. Good morning to you. It's nice to see you this morning. Providing free school meals to children who need them compared to free school meals for every child is quite a big step. What do you think?
Is it a big step? I think Dr. Kingdon's absolutely right to point to the fact that we should be giving a free lunch to every child in school. After all, let's look at the reasons for it. Can we afford it as a country? Well, we're just witnessing the political turmoil from wanting to give away billions to the very wealthy. So I think this country can afford it. The second point is that, of course, there's a huge bureaucracy attached to deciding which children are eligible for a free school lunch and which are not. One could wipe away that bureaucracy, that extra administration, very, very simply by simply affording this to all children. And then, of course, we know that there are lots of children at the moment who are falling between the gaps. And there's a lot of disadvantage too, where schools which are sitting on borders of borough boundaries, one school is giving free meals to all children and another is not. So, and then there's the stigma, of course, of being a child who gets a free school lunch compared to those who don't. And then I guess we all know what a convivial, what a lovely thing it is to do, to sit down and share a meal with friends and family. And what better place to do that, to start learning how to do that, than in school. So I'm afraid the arguments in favour of extending a free lunch to every child are really quite persuasive.
But does it make economic sense in the situation that we're in right now, when there will be, of course, there are children that are hungry and families that are suffering, and I think most people would agree with you that the children that are hungry should, of course, be given a free school meal, a nutritious meal at lunchtime. But there are so many families that do not need that. They have money at home. They have really nutritious packed lunches. It's not something that's needed. Does this make economic sense?
Makes total economic sense. GB News was kind enough to have me on your programme a few days ago talking about the British Medical Association's report on valuing health. To value the health of our children is surely one of the most important economic things we can do. And I believe there have been reports now that are putting a figure on this, showing that, in fact, there's a 38 pence return on every pound spent on a child's free lunch. So it makes perfect economic sense from a societal point of view, from an economic point of view, from a health point of view, to actually treat all children equally, to level up, to help them learn their civic and social responsibilities, and, of course, to value their health, because they will be the healthy, productive citizens of the future. Makes total economic sense.
How much, on average, would you say a healthy school meal, how much would it cost per head?
Well, it depends, doesn't it? It depends on what one's going to cook and how you're going to cook it. I think that question is really better directed at someone like Jamie Oliver, who is really an expert in the economics of what one cooks and how you cook it. But all of us who are parents know that one can produce a very nutritious meal for children at not particularly great expense. That, however, needs to be put into the context, as I said in my opening remarks, of what the nation can afford as a whole. And it is tragic, it is absolutely tragic that we should be discussing, one, that children are going hungry, and two, whether or not we can afford a free lunch to every single school-going child. What has this country come to that it should be discussing this?
Professor Modi, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Your views would be very welcome on that. GB Views at gbnews.uk. A lot of you getting it, loads of you, hundreds, thousands getting in touch this morning, actually. An hour ago, we were doing CPR.
Very badly.
Very badly. But
Sorry.
Catherine says, when my dad had a cardiac arrest in our kitchen, my husband helped to save his life and he just had a go. No first aid training. Him and I together with a close friend used only CPR until the ambulance arrived. We saved his life, for which my dad was truly thankful. I bet he was.
Wow.
But it is just that thing in that situation. You want to look online, you want to see how it's done. but actually, you've just got to get on with it.
Got to go for it. And that's what Florence was saying. It's better to do something, and it's very unlikely you'll get it wrong. So do have a look online. It's on St John's Ambulance website, and I'm sure you can watch back on our segment that we did a little bit earlier as well.
Yeah, rewind it on the app. Paul in Essex, morning Paul, said, I cannot surely be alone in my wish for a little more levity. As a nation, we're bombarded from every direction all day and every day. So please, as important as politics is, I would prefer a break at the start of the day. I agree. We've got to cover it, but we've also got to do the lighter stuff as well, which is why Paul in Essex, for you especially, Paul and Karen have been in touch with this lovely picture. They're having a lazy Sunday, watching us with their cat, Sugar. Have we got the picture? Anyone? Let's try and get it.
We'd love to see
that
Sugar.
Would be the point.
Oh,
there
look.
you go. So there's Sugar. She's a beautiful white cat watching us on a tablet, I think.
That
There you
is
go.
so cute. Look.
And she's in bed watching us, which is how you should all be doing it, quite frankly.
She's very focused as well, isn't she?
She is.
What a
Well,
lovely cat.
who wouldn't be?
Oh, that is really, really lovely. And David's been in touch with a lovely comment this morning. He said, just to say, Ellie is wearing a lovely dress and Stephen is as dapper as always.
One tries. Well, maybe
Isn't he just?
Well, maybe we should whip all this off, because coming up...
No.
Where do you stand on nudity? We'll explain all in a couple of minutes.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking blustery, with showers becoming confined to the far north. Elsewhere, mostly dry. Let's take a look at the details.
Well, across the south and west, dry, plenty of sunshine this morning, although some cloud will spread across the region later.
A dry start across the south and east with plenty of sunshine. However, cloud will move across the region from the south during the morning.
Now, it's going to be a fine and dry start with a fair amount of sunshine during the morning in Wales. Cloud, though, will increase from the south by late morning.
The Midlands will be fine and dry with prolonged sunny spells for all during the morning. However, cloudier skies will spread northwards from late morning. Winds mostly light but becoming slightly breezier into the afternoon.
To the northeast of England, then, it's going to be dry with prolonged sunny spells. Slightly cloudier in the far west with some patchy rain around. Winds mostly light, but they will increase.
Rather windy with showers continuing to affect the north and west of Scotland during the morning, but those easing somewhere into the afternoon. Elsewhere dry with decent sunny spells.
For Northern Ireland, dry. Lots of sunshine at first, but skies will turn hazy from mid-morning. Outbreaks of cloud and rain arriving during the afternoon.
Cloud and rain accompanied with strong winds will spread north and east during the afternoon and evening, and that is how your weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
The Chancellor has admitted that mistakes were made in the mini-budget, and as a result, some taxes will have to go up.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock. It's Sunday, the 16th of October, and this is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie.
We're live across the whole of the UK on both your TV and your radio. We're also online, so wherever you are, you can take us with you. Here are your top stories this morning.
Well, the new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, says the PM's administration made mistakes and there are difficult decisions ahead. He plans to release a medium-term finance plan to be unveiled on Halloween, which he calls a proper budget.
Meanwhile, the Bank of England is warning that interest rate increases could be bigger than previously thought. This, as Andrew Bailey says, a stronger response may be needed to fight inflation.
Camilla has been pictured alongside hundreds of Paddington Bears and other teddies. The toys left at royal residences in memory of Queen Elizabeth and will be sent to Bernardo's. They've all been washed.
You'll be glad to know, yes. Now, as ever, you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews. We do love to hear from you.
Let's kick straight off then, should we, with the new Chancellor, who's admitted the government went too far too fast with the mini-budget and the plans to grow the economy.
In a statement released last night, Jeremy Hunt admitted that it won't be an easy road ahead, but maintained that his focus will be growth underpinned by stability.
Well, he also suggested tax rises could form part of a painful fiscal package designed to restore market confidence in the UK.
Well, let's get more reaction now from GB News' political reporter, Catherine Forster. Good morning to you, Catherine. And the rumour mill in Westminster, well, it just keeps on going, doesn't it? Plotting and scheming continuing over this weekend, already talking about who might replace Liz Truss.
Yes, I've been looking around for some positive news for Liz Truss today, and really there is very little. The only thing that I think will give her hope at the moment is that there is zero agreement on. A lot of people wanted to go, but there really is no agreement on who would be put in her place. But just this morning, Lord Hayward, who's a Conservative peer and pollster, has said it would be very difficult for Liz Truss to remain in office. Paul Goodman, who is the editor of the Conservative Home website, has written a piece basically saying it's over for her. And Robert Halfon, who's a very influential backbencher, chair of the Education Select Committee, and has been critical before, but he has been saying that the Conservative Party, that basically the government has seemed like libertarian jihadists and treating people like laboratory mice. So a very febrile atmosphere indeed. And Liz Truss clearly would have hoped that in sacking the Chancellor and putting Jeremy Hunt in, that might have restored some stability and some support. And the Bank of England are happy because Jeremy Hunt is now making these stability, tax rises, spending cuts, noises that may calm the market.
Balancing the books.
Yeah, but I mean, what must Tory members feel about this? They elected her on this promise of low taxes to stimulate growth. And most of Trussonomics, as it was called, now appears to have been thrown in the bin.
Yeah. I mean, it's hugely difficult. The pressure she is under now is immense. But what would this take? I mean, there's all this talk about, would the 1922 committee change their rules and all that sort. I mean, that's complicated. It's about her resigning, isn't it? All of this. Would she do it?
You should never say never, should you? I can't see a world in which she chooses to resign. I mean, she's holding firm. She's written in the Sun today. She's still talking about growth. She's saying we're going to get there differently. She's still talking about the anti-growth coalition. She seems to be trying to hold the line that nothing has changed, although clearly an awful lot has changed. I can't see her resigning, but I think if the Conservative Party comes up with a plan for who to replace her with, possibly the current Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace. Now, she had said spending would go up to 3% on defence. Jeremy Hunt is not guaranteeing that. Ben Wallace didn't even run for the leadership, although he is popular. Rishi Sunak, Penny Mordaunt as a joint ticket, which has been floated. Apparently that's very unlikely because Penny Mordaunt thinks that she can do the job of Prime Minister herself, and Rishi Sunak certainly wouldn't play second fiddle to her. So they don't have an answer. And for Liz Truss at the moment, she seems to have upset pretty much everybody, and she's really in a very, very difficult position today.
Like you say, though, Catherine, they don't have an answer as of yet. These names are being bandied around, but Liz Truss, we think, will be hoping to hang on to the 31st of October when this proper budget comes in, as Jeremy Hunt is calling it. Do we have any idea what might be in that, or is it too early to tell?
Well, we know from what Kwasi Kwarteng laid out and the Prime Minister laid out only 3 weeks ago, that already the top rate of tax cut has been reversed, that corporation tax will go up. That was announced on Friday. We also now expect that the cut in the basic rate of income tax, which was due to go from 20 to 19p, is going to be scrapped. I suspect there'll be lots more. I do wonder whether, although the energy support package is massively popular, because we were all terrified, weren't we, of these £6,000 a year energy bills, and now, you know, the average will be 2.5. But it's massively expensive because it's really untargeted, and it's potentially going to cost 150 billion, and we don't know whether they may look at reining that in and targeting it more so that millionaires are not getting that, or, you know, multi-million-pound businesses. But I think there seems to be going to be a huge rewrite, and Jeremy Hunt and the Prime Minister are at checkers as we speak, working on that. And it's only 2 weeks until that's due to be presented with an assessment from the OBR.
We seem to be in a place where, I mean, someone was saying earlier on that, you know, the Conservatives at the moment are in power but not in control. At what point? I mean, this is like an open goal for the opposition, isn't it?
It is. I mean, Labour really don't have to do anything, do they? They're just sitting on the sidelines. I mean, they're saying reverse this they're going to have to get rid of the kamikaze budget now, aren't they? But the thing is that actually Labour have supported quite a lot of it. So on the one hand, they're saying get rid of the whole thing, but they've supported the scrapping the rise in national insurance. They've supported the cut in income tax that's going to go. They've supported the energy price freeze. So they are... I mean, Rosie Duffield was on television yesterday, Labour MP, and she was saying, you know, it's actually quite painful to watch. But for their electoral prospects, this is fabulous. And they do say, don't they, that governments don't win elections. You know, oppositions don't win elections, that governments lose them.
Which is where it seems to be going now, isn't it? You know, whichever party you support, it's... you know, at the minute, it's very hard to see anything other than a Labour government the next 2 years, isn't it?
Yeah.
Frankly. I mean, even the Tory-supporting pundits are saying that.
But things can change very fast. I mean, if you go back a year, Boris Johnson seemed to be at the height of his powers. He'd got this 80-seat majority where they're talking about 10 years in power. People were thinking Keir Starmer wasn't sufficiently dynamic. That was a year ago. Then there was the Owen Paterson, then there was the Partygate. And look where we are now. So if we are 2 years off a general election, things can always change.
This is true. This is true. Things can only get better. There's a song in there somewhere for somebody. Catherine, thank you very much indeed. John says, all this doom and gloom on the media when the majority with government energy support are managing perfectly well. I suppose in a sense, John, you're probably right. I suppose the majority are managing, are coping. A lot of people, an awful lot, many millions of people are really feeling the pinch.
Yeah, they really
on
are. People who've never felt the pinch before.
And interesting, pension, because obviously pensions fall into all of this, and they still haven't decided what they're doing with pensions yet, whether they're going to increase by average earnings or by inflation. Catherine says, and this highlights it all for me, my husband paid into a works pension for 39 years. Sadly, upon his death at 67, Oh, so young. His work pension suddenly halved. His state pension stopped, which was a full state pension, so she didn't get that, something which is never mentioned. Quite unfair, as he's earned these pensions, but they were quickly withdrawn on his death. I think the problem, Catherine, with pensions is, do we understand them? I mean, I talk with my pensions man a lot, because obviously I'm 48, so I mean, obviously looking into, you know, when I want to retire and what I'll be getting, doing all that planning and all that sort of thing. It's so confusing. It's so utterly confusing.
It is.
As to what on earth you get, where it goes if you die, all the rest of it. So, I mean, that sounds like an awful situation, but whether that's all right or not and actually what should have happened, I just don't know. I don't know.
Lots of you have been in touch this morning on the Just Stop Oil protesters. Got lots of you talking, as the same as it did yesterday. Colin in Durham, good morning to you, Colin. He said, I just watched the protesters feature. Police can't do anything. What is going on? Our police seem powerless. And Phil in Staffordshire, he agrees with you. He said, just leave them glued to whatever they are fixed to and let everyone walk around them. They had the right to protest, but not to stop people from earning a living. So lots of people would agree with you.
Yeah, Stella says, if I walked into, and we'll see this in a moment, we're going to play you Jeff Moody's report in just a minute about, there's been days of Extinction Rebellion protests over the weekend. There's going to be a big march to Westminster this afternoon, and we'll show you Jeff's report in just a second. But one of the scenes of that is people throwing milk around a cheese counter in Selfridges. Quite what that achieves, I don't know. Stella says, if I walked into Selfridges and threw milk all over the dairy counter, would the staff be told to let me do it? Or would I be arrested and charged with criminal damage? Well, the latter, isn't it? If so, what's the difference between me doing it and Just Stop Oil members doing it? I think that's a very, very valid point.
Very valid point. Yeah, you'd be done for criminal damage. You would. And I'll just to quickly do this one from Rob, because it's a really good point. We've been talking about food banks and poverty and people being plunged into poverty this winter. And Rob's made this point. He says, 1 minute we're talking about people in poverty going to food banks. Next, we're looking at self-indulgent morons destroying food. I never realised milk and cheese were made of oil. And I think their point, I think the reason why they were targeting cheese counters in Selfridges was they want more people to go vegan, and therefore it'd be better for the planet. I think it was the sense of that. You have to kind of work it out, like with the tomato soup and the Van Gogh. You're like, what's that about?
What's it all about?
An attack on the natural world.
Is it?
Yes.
Well,
got to read between the lines.
Putting it all into context as to what's happening, what's happened this weekend, and what is happening today. Here's Jeff Moody.
Security!
You can hear the disbelief in the man's voice as he calls for security. Two protesters throwing tomato soup at one of the most precious pieces of art in the world. They want to just stop oil, but the only oil here is in the paint. Last week it was cheese. They poured milk over the dairy counter at Selfridges.
Do you guys not intervene? You don't? We're not allowed.
And this is what's angering so many. We're not allowed to stop them, say Selfridges staff. Even when they throw paint at Scotland Yard itself. For many, the police's lightness of touch is a sign of weakness. Rumours abound the police have been handing out cups of tea. Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rawley is defending his force's lack of force.
I haven't seen the cups of tea point, and I hope we haven't been doing that, because I don't think we should be. I agree with you. That's not our responsibility. Are these protests? Are they currently, or are they heading towards causing serious disruption to life of the community? And over the last 11 days, all of those partners have been of view that it doesn't cause serious disruption.
Many are saying, if this isn't serious disruption, then what is? They glue themselves to the street. They block roads. An ambulance forced to find another route. Just Stop Oil say these protests are the only way to get their message across.
But I think we've seen with all the strike action that's happening, you don't get anything by just sitting on the sidelines and sitting and wishing. You have to make it unignorable, and we have been ignored for so long.
But it's not just oil. Insulate Britain out too. Here gluing themselves to the pavement outside Parliament to disrupt Prime Minister's question time. This weekend, the turn of Extinction Rebellion, a mass sit-in, events and speakers, culminating in a march on Westminster this afternoon. They say the government's policies are unjust. They say the climate crisis is being ignored. They say they're aiming for 100,000 on the streets by 2023. Today, they're marching from Hyde Park to Parliament Square in what they're calling a show of strength. Many now wondering who has the strength to stop them before someone gets seriously hurt or worse. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Well, it's those kind of protests that we saw there that will soon be subjected to stricter rules, according to the Home Secretary.
Well, for more on the political reaction, we're joined by John Grant, a senior lecturer in sustainable construction and climate change at Sheffield Hallam University. Good morning to you, John.
Good morning.
Good morning. I mean, we were saying earlier, not many people would disagree with the aims, the eventual aims of these groups, but there is a lot of controversy about the way that they go about it, isn't there?
Yes, I mean, it's a real dilemma. As somebody who's been in this for 30 years myself and followed the sort of political agenda and written to my MP and worked very seriously in the research for solutions to the problems that we're facing, and actually fundamentally just being ignored, it's very hard now when you have a government comes in and expands the fossil fuel sort of proposals, and you know, I don't think any of these people want to glue themselves to the road. What they feel here is that they've got no option in such an emergency, which, you know, is already taking lives. You know, your piece just a moment ago was saying that, you know, maybe a life will be taken or something. But, you know, here in Sheffield, we lose 500 people a year to air quality problems, entirely due to the use of cars and their emissions, and these are real losses. And we can't forget what happened this summer with regards to 40 degrees. You know, just unprecedented. And the United Nations is sort of setting us on this road that this next 5 years are critical. And it just seems like business as usual. And you know, these people are desperate.
I mean, it's interesting. I was saying earlier on, because I've got to say, I sort of lack sympathy with some of the tactics, John. And I was saying earlier on, what on earth do they think they're actually going to achieve? Do you think it's I mean, because it is much higher in our agenda than it ever was, do you think that is because of protests like this that have done that? Or is it the sort of, you know, the people like yourself writing to MPs and getting attention that way?
Well, I don't think I'd be on your show talking to you if people hadn't been doing this rebellion in London at the moment. So, you know, it's a self-fulfilling element. But it's got to be both, hasn't it? So long as government ignores the fact that we're in an emergency. I mean, I would much prefer to be coming up with a plan as to what we're going to do. But at the moment, we're still looking at expanding, you know, fracking and our oil and gas exploration in the North Sea. That isn't responding to the emergency that we're facing. And so these people really don't see as though they've got a choice. And honestly, neither do I, in terms of some kind of direct action. I just wish that you know, the sort of things that I've been working on for 25 years in my university could be rolled out so that people wouldn't have to worry about their energy bills, because one of the areas I look at is zero heating homes, and these are homes that stay warm and cool in the summer and the winter without any additional energy, and they don't cost any more to build, but we have no building regulations that cover that. So, you know, we're about to pour billions, hundreds of billions into foreign companies to keep our bills stable. Whereas I would say surely the solution is to spend that money on allowing people on improving people's homes so that they wouldn't need that energy. And so we wouldn't need to pay these foreign companies to keep our energy bills low.
But isn't now the perfect time then, John? I mean, for something, I mean, I haven't seen your proposals and what you've worked on all these years, but it sounds truly amazing. It sounds like only an idiot would ignore something like that. So isn't now the time for governments to be listening to people like you to come forward with these, what would be considered radical strategies, which would be comparatively easy to implement.
Well, oh my goodness, just say that again, if that's okay. I would just say that again. Because, yeah, of course, I've been here. I'm not, I will take any sort of media coverage in a vain attempt to try and change this narrative, to focus on the people of the UK so that they can help themselves. And we spend money here in the UK to do that. But as I keep saying, at the moment, we have this seeming agenda where it's growth at all costs, and there doesn't seem to be any coherent policy as to where that growth is going to be. It seems as though any growth is good growth, rather than a growth in our construction industry, building good houses, or in our renewable energy to provide cheap energy and deliver that energy to our residents in a fair and just way. But, you know, at the moment, it's just go for growth and devil take the poorest, which is just so traumatizing to me and so many other people that you've been talking about today.
Yeah, John, I mean, like you say, you would like the government to look more into sustainable construction. I did just want to ask you about Home Secretary Suella Braverman's comments. This is about the protesters in the past few days. She says she wants to implement a crackdown on these protests, and they're looking at a new criminal offence that is planned for interference with infrastructure such as airports, railways and roads, which could carry a maximum sentence of 12 months in prison or an unlimited fine. What do you make of that? Is that the right way to deal with these protesters?
All they want is a voice. What they want is that their core demand is to give people a voice within these things called citizens' assemblies, so that people will have the opportunity to debate these issues and take forward a policy, a change, which some people would call radical, and I would call inevitable. That you know, we will use less energy, we spend less money, and will cause less harm to our planet. But the idea that threatening these people with this, I don't think it will work. In fact, you know, this is a human rights issue. People are dying with regards to climate change, and it's accelerating. It's getting worse. So, you know, I think the idea that, and I know people are frustrated. This is not the intent of these events, but the media fundamentally ignores this voice, my voice, other scientists' voice, until somebody does something, you know, which some people would call stupid. I would agree, it is quite extreme. But, you know, if you could come up with a way of getting the government to listen, be it you know, citizens' assemblies or in a dialogue with scientists, I'm all for it. John, but it's getting worse, and it's getting worse very quickly, and we only have sort of 3 to 5 years to do this.
Has anyone ever listened to you, John, with these proposals? I mean, you must have sent these out left, right, and centre over a number of years. Have you had any serious discussion with anyone in power?
Well, actually, that's a really good point, because I was part of a small part, I must say, a very small part of a team back in 2006 that put forward the idea of building zero carbon homes, and we were going to ask the construction industry, we gave them 10 years from 2006 to 2016, that all homes built from 2016 onwards would be zero carbon, really low energy. And in 2015, the current government cancelled that programme because they said that we wouldn't be able to build sufficient houses at volume. And here we are. And I would really argue that was completely wrong, that the housing industry just didn't want to change. It's a very conservative with a small c organisation, and they just didn't want to change. But we should have been building from 2016 to the present day houses that, well, under 300 quid a year to run, and we're not. And that was an actual decision made by the housing minister in 2015. So there you go. I wish there was something better I could say.
Well, I tell you what, John, there'll be plenty of people watching who are sceptical about all the climate issues, very sceptical about the protesters and all the rest of it, but they wouldn't be sceptical about having a house that was costing them 300 quid a year to run, rather than, on average, $2,500 at the moment. And so, perhaps there will be more people listening to you now. It's been really good to talk to you. Thank you.
A pleasure. Thank you.
And you're so right with that as well. I think with the Ukraine war situation, there is now such a focus on our own. You're right there, getting cosy. There is such a focus now on our own fuel supply and being sustainable and renewable energy, because it's cheaper, and that's what people need.
I'm not an eco warrior. Don't get me wrong. I'm not. I don't know quite what I believe in with it all. But if you can do stuff which is sustainable and cleaner and cheaper, then what's not to love?
Exactly, it's a win-win, isn't it? But is this the right way to go about it, what we're seeing with the Just Stop Oil and, you know, the protesters that we've seen in the last 12 days? And is it right, Suella Braverman, this massive crackdown that she's talking about, unlimited fines and 12 months in prison, is that the way to handle it? Do let us know, gbviews@gbnews.uk. It does get lots of you talking.
I think John Grant for Housing Minister, whoever is next.
He was passionate as well, and
he knows
and that's the right kind of passionate. You know your stuff, and you're doing something about it.
I was impressed by that.
Not throwing milk around. No, great.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Well,
exactly. Well, let us know what you think. GBViews,
flies are everywhere. Aidan wasn't wrong. They're everywhere.
I don't know what's going on with the little flies, little sort of reddy brown things. I don't know what they are. Fruit flies.
Fruit flies. We've got any fruit in here?
Anyway, give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down about fruit flies. But are you too old to use emojis?
Yeah. Well, stay tuned, because we're going to be talking about that after this break. Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking blustery, with showers becoming confined to the far north. Elsewhere, mostly dry. Let's take a look at the details.
Well, across the south and west, dry, plenty of sunshine this morning, although some cloud will spread across the region later.
A dry start across the south and east with plenty of sunshine. However, cloud will move across the region from the south during the morning.
Now, it's going to be a fine and dry start with a fair amount of sunshine during the morning in Wales. Cloud, though, will increase from the south by late morning.
The Midlands will be fine and dry with prolonged sunny spells for all during the morning. However, cloudier skies will spread northwards from late morning. Winds mostly light, but becoming slightly breezier into the afternoon.
To the northeast of England, then, it's going to be dry with prolonged sunny spells. Slightly cloudier in the far west with some patchy rain around. Winds mostly light, but they will increase.
Rather windy, with showers continuing to affect the north and west of Scotland during the morning, but those easing somewhere into the afternoon. Elsewhere, dry with decent sunny spells.
For Northern Ireland, dry. Lots of sunshine at first, but skies will turn hazy from mid-morning. Outbreaks of cloud and rain arriving during the afternoon.
Cloud and rain accompanied with strong winds will spread north and east during the afternoon and evening, and that is how your weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It's 9:30 on the nose. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
Now, some members of Gen Z.
Who are they now?
Now, they are 20... You can help me out.
16 to 30.
Oh, am I Gen Z then?
Oh, you are?
Must be.
Oh,
wow.
no, this is about
We've learned
you.
something today. OK, I'm Gen Z, yeah. We've taken to social media to call out the thumbs up emoji, which Gen Z people call passive-aggressive.
Passive-aggressive.
Yeah.
So the emojis, in case you're not entirely clear, because we cover all ranges, we know there's all sorts of ages. You know, when you send a text or a message or whatever, and the little symbols you can put up. A thumbs up, I send them all the time.
Yeah, so do I, yeah.
Anyway, the topic. I'll do this bit.
You
do
take
mind?
this, yeah.
Gen Z, they're very, very greedy. The topic of appropriate emojis have been trending all week. Some people believing that responding to a post or message with a thumbs up is dismissive and an unsettling response.
So what do experts think of this? And we'll have our own discussion as well, I think. Let's speak to social media expert Alan Stevens. Good morning
Good
to
morning.
you, Alan.
Good morning.
So tell us a bit more about this. So it's not...
These people.
So let's talk about the thumbs up. So there's the conventional, brilliant,
That's
but
right,
also
yes.
it can be
Great.
misconstrued as perhaps...
Apparently, I mean, I'd like to self-identify as not being in Gen Z. I want to make that clear at the start. So I want to make that clear. But yes, apparently, a lot of people in that generation regard it as a slightly aggressive gesture.
Why? How can they be thinking that?
Well, they obviously use it. The thing is, communication is about receiving a message in the way it's intended to be sent. And they receive it in a completely different way to the way most of us do.
That's their fault, then, isn't it?
Do you know what,
Well,
though?
yes, it is, but that's how communication works, isn't it? That's
Do you know what, though? I can actually agree to some point, because I have been known to use it in a row on
Well, there we are, you
text.
see.
You go, oh, good one, you know, that kind of thing, like sarcastic.
Yeah, it does happen.
It can be used like that.
I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of emojis, and they all mean different things to different people. So if you use one, you've got to be careful that the person who receives it understands it in the same way.
But I mean, it just seems odd that emojis are getting hammered for this, because we've all been, even back in the day, we've all been in that situation where you've sent a text message to someone and they have completely misread it because they're not seeing your face as you're typing.
We've all done that. You're quite right.
Yeah.
We have, yeah.
Yeah, so this is only then the same thing.
It is, but if you explain it in words, as long as you put words in, I mean, you might, autocorrect might change the words a little bit, but that happens too. But if you use an emoji, somebody can misinterpret it. My advice is just try and avoid them.
Yeah, but also things like a heart.
Well, a heart, yeah, I mean, even a heart apparently can be misinterpreted. You know, does it mean that you're really in love with this person, or does it mean you just like their message, or is it like a little X at the end of a message on a card? We don't really know.
Or what colour hearts you say.
That's important too. Yes, and you've got to be careful about sending some types of vegetable symbol as well.
Oh, well, yes, they can be slightly...
We can't talk about that.
Yeah, well, no. Well, this all stems from an original Reddit post, doesn't it? From a Gen Z person who says they're quite unsettled with the use of a thumbs up because they find it quite short or perhaps even passive-aggressive. So...
I'd send them... that particular person, I would send a snowflake emoji to.
Well, there you are, you see, so you do know how to use them, don't you?
But then if you're speaking to someone who is much older on text, it can sometimes be a bit... Like when I text my mum, she often just replies a kiss or a heart or something because it's quicker than sitting and texting. Yeah, and it's a speed thing, isn't it? It's a speed thing. But where Gen Z perhaps are on their phones all the time and a lot quicker, they're like, well, what have I done wrong then? That you've only just sent... a quick emoji rather than a few...
Well, that's true, but they're sending them with what's in their head. So they know what they mean by it, but if they're sending it to somebody who doesn't, that's where the problem is.
So it's all about decent communication.
It's exactly that. That's exactly what it is. Does the same person understand what they're receiving as what you're sending?
So how do we balance that out between... Because this would then seem to be a generational thing.
Yeah.
It is pretty much.
So how then do we balance that out?
Well, I would say if you're communicating with somebody who's the same generation demographic, you're OK. But if you're talking to your kids or grandkids or something, you've got to be careful.
Right.
Yeah.
So just use actual words.
Yes.
But it is interesting, isn't it? As technology progresses, it's how different demographics communicate, isn't it? And it's just maybe something to be aware of. But very, very interesting.
Interesting,
Certainly.
but slightly. I want to rant about it.
Go on.
Is that maybe? But I just want to say, what's wrong with these people, Gen Zs? I know. Just getting upset 'cause someone sent you a thumbs up.
Well,
get a grip. Alan, one last question for you. What is the most popular emoji? Do we know?
Most popular emoji, it depends what generation you mean, but actually with my generation, it is the thumbs up.
It is the thumbs up.
That's the end of the conversation. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Perfect.
Exactly.
There you go.
Not that one, though. I've never seen that one.
Oh,
don't know where that one's
that's a
come
new
from.
one.
It's a bit of a naughty thumbs up one, that one, isn't it?
Cheeky thumbs up.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
even
is.
I'm offended by that, let's be honest. Come on. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. Well, let us know. Do you think the thumbs up emoji is aggressive? Do you think we're all being a bit snowflakey?
Snowflakey,
Gen Zers?
absolutely. I just think, what's going on?
Oh, well, I've learned from that conversation I'm Gen Z. Who knew?
Yeah. No,
Who
I
knew?
didn't know.
There you go.
I never understand what these... I mean, I don't know what I am, then. I don't know what I am.
We'll find out.
48.
I'll work it out for you.
What's 48, you know?
48. You'd be a Gen X.
Gen X? Oh, right.
Well, we can self-identify now.
Oh, if I'm Gen X, whatever that means. I don't know. Extra special.
Right, lots more to come. Lots more fun, including Would You Dare to Bear? Stephen?
Very possibly, actually,
You wanna
between
stay
you and
tuned?
me. But I will keep my clothes on, but someone else won't be after this.
And I will as well, let's just be clear.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It is 9:38. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
Now, every 5 minutes, someone in the UK will have a stroke. And a new mum who suffered a rare stroke 5 weeks after giving birth wants to raise awareness of how pregnant women and new mothers can be affected.
Well, the 28-year-old from Buckinghamshire had to learn to walk and talk again after cerebral venous thrombosis. Alice Porter has the story.
I mean, in that moment, essentially, I thought I was going to die.
Alice was just getting used to her life with a 5-week-old baby when the symptoms of a stroke suddenly began.
I sort of struggled to get out of bed, to get to the bathroom, and in the end my husband had to kind of carry me down the stairs. Could, by this point, not move my right arm above sort of my head.
Hello, space station. In hospital, Alice was diagnosed with a cerebral venous thrombosis, a rare condition which often causes stroke-like symptoms. Partially paralysed, she also suffered 2 seizures. She began her recovery on a stroke ward, the youngest person by decades.
I was completely bedbound, was unable to kind of go to the toilet, to eat, to feed myself, to sit up. Obviously wasn't able to breastfeed, couldn't pump myself either, so I was having to explain to the nurses while struggling with language and speech a lot. And I think being a young mum, I just felt that he wouldn't see me grow up, he wouldn't know me, and kind of thought a lot about the impact that would have on like my husband. So yeah, I guess that was really difficult.
1 in 1,000 women will have a blood clot during pregnancy or in the 6 weeks after giving birth. Consequently, pregnancy and childbirth increase women's risk of a stroke. Professor Beverly Hunt is Medical Director of Thrombosis UK.
Their blood gets more sticky, and it starts very early on, soon after conception. And the time when the blood is stickiest is the 6 weeks after giving birth. A lot of women who die in pregnancy are dying from pulmonary emboli. So it's an ongoing problem, and obstetricians and haematologists are very aware of this and will give women at high risk small doses of blood thinners to take.
As she continues to recover, Alice uses social media to raise awareness of the dangers of blood clots so that more families can spot the potentially fatal signs.
Not everybody will have seizures, not everybody will lose sort of motion and have that stroke element. So sometimes I've heard other people's stories around people just being dismissed as a migraine, but sort of knowing this and just really pushing and making sure, I think is invaluable.
Alice Porter, GB News.
Now, with us in the studio for the last 20 minutes or so, we've got our very own Stephanie Tetchy with all the showbiz news. We've got our very own Mr. Aidan McGee with all the sport. Good morning to you both. And I wanted you both in nice and early because we've got some slightly, I suppose, difficult subjects to talk about, which we're
bearing it all.
We are
bearing it all.
So we'll have a chat after we've talked to our next guest, because we are turning to a slightly taboo topic of nudity.
Yes, that's because stripping off is on the rise, with almost 7 million Britons reportedly identifying as nudists, and nearly half of those are young people.
Oh,
our guest, we've just been told, has
dropped out.
Which isn't great, is it?
Yes, it was good. Well, we'll see if we can get sorted out. President of the British Naturism, Dr. Mark Bass, who was going to tell us all about it. Thank heavens you two are in already.
Yeah.
And fully clothed for the show. But, I mean, this is... Look, I have nothing against naturism at all. And I think if you are someone who wants to be comfortable and naked, that's all well and good. I don't see how we can be offended just by bodies, because we all have a body and that's something to be celebrated, right? But I'm very surprised at the idea that half of young people want to bear all.
I'm one of them.
Really?
I've always, when I was with my ex, I was saying I always wanted us to go to a nudist beach.
Really?
And he always used to look at me like I was, like, gone bonkers. I don't know what it is, like, but I feel quite ashamed to say that publicly because everyone's like, what, you want to go? But I just feel like it's freeing. There's something freeing about being on a nudist beach. But I think, actually, if it came down to
So you've never actually done it?
No, I haven't, because, again, I always hold myself back. So that's why I wanted to ask the guests, like, how do you remove this shame and stigma about wanting to, you know, go on a nudist beach?
And is that what's holding you back? Is that what it is? You're embarrassed?
Yeah, I think I'm embarrassed, and I think because there is a stigma, because people always do think, are you okay? Because you want to go on a nudist beach. But I just find it freeing, and I find on social media, everyone's so revealing these days anyway. People are practically half naked on there. So what about just being on a beach naked?
Well, I think we've got him, have we? Dr. Mark Bass, President of British Naturism. Morning to you. Practising what you're preaching there, all well and good. Look, our Stephanie here was just saying that she's always been sort of a bit tempted to go to a nudist beach, but hasn't quite had the bottle to do it. Is it still a taboo subject?
I don't think it really is a taboo. And actually what I would suggest to her is just do it. Everybody's nervous when they sort of think about it because it sounds scary. But actually when you do it, you suddenly get there and within 5 minutes you think, oh, this is really cool.
So what is the appeal then, Dr. Mark Bass? Why do people like to get their kit off?
I think it's mostly because it's a way of reclaiming your freedom, isn't it? It's a way of reclaiming your rights. So we get away from the pressures that we feel in our day-to-day lives, and we're just ourselves. And so clearly, following things like COVID, that's a really big deal because we've faced a lot of impositions, and so you do.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
That your line is not helping, Mark Bass. I don't know if we'll try and connect it. You might just have to leave it there. Look, we got the idea. Yeah. I think part of the problem, Stephanie, and I put this to you as our budding naturist this morning, surprising to all of us. Is the problem is there is this connection that we've got as human beings on nudity,
definitely,
and sexuality.
I think
that's not. I mean, which is understandable. But
I think we're quite prudish as a society, and the thing is, I think now we're just, what's happening with the younger generation, a lot of things are being turned on their head, and like all things that were previously, we had this kind of honour and respectfuls going out the window in that sense. But again, I think it also depends on your sex as well, because I think as a female, what's held me back is as well, you know, revealing all and having that glare of the sexual stare.
Yes.
So that's what's always held me back.
What about body image in all of this? Because, I mean, we all have our flaws.
Yeah, we do.
Some people don't, but they're few and far between. But the rest of us have our flaws.
But I think the conversation recently over the past few years where all body types are starting to be accepted now. So this whole supermodel look now is no longer the in thing now. Is whether you're curvy, you're slim, it's all been accepted now. So because it's been accepted, why not flaunt it?
Yeah.
And that's what I think Dr. Mark Bass was going to say. I think it's half of young people. So of 2,249 people, half of 16 to 25-year-olds said they would strip off naked. And maybe it is that body image thing of younger people and social media, like you said.
What do you reckon?
What do you think?
Yeah, I was exposed... Well, sorry, it's the wrong word, isn't it?
Yes, it is, actually.
I remember coming into contact with a nudist beach while on holiday in Blackpool when I was about 10 or 11. And you know what? The reason I didn't notice I was there because you're on a beach. And so, you know, most people, if you're not fully naked, you're almost there, aren't you?
Well, yeah.
Anyway, but in terms of society being more prudish, I had a minor problem down below a few years ago. It wasn't anything major, it was a minor operation. But no one wanted to talk about it with me ever because it was that. It wasn't, you know, if it had been my elbow or my wrist or neck, they'd been queuing up to give me sympathy. I felt a bit on my own on it, actually.
Oh,
yeah, I did. I got through it. Don't worry.
Well, good. Look, Mark's back. We'll try one more question with Mark and hope the line holds up. I mean, the problem is, and let's be perfectly clear, it's not. It doesn't seem to be about our bodies here, Mark. It's about our private bits. That's what causes, I guess, offence amongst some people, doesn't it?
Possibly, although we have to question why that is the case. But I think the point that was just being made about healthcare is really important because we know that a lot of women are not getting smear tests because they're embarrassed. And that means they're actually putting themselves at risk by not following normal medical procedures. So if we can get past that and start to actually just accept we are people, we all have bits, and it's not really that big a deal. It's good for all of us, so both for our mental health and indeed for our physical health.
Can I just ask, how should we embrace it then for those who want to? It's not about flaunting it in front of people who aren't comfortable with it, is it? I mean, presumably it's all about, you know, doing it amongst, you know, like-minded people.
Absolutely, because a lot of it is about sort of freedom of choice. So if people choose not to do it, then fine. If people choose to do it, then great. But what I would suggest is just find an easy way to dip in. So even if that's just sort of making your morning coffee before getting dressed, you'll suddenly feel you're a lot more relaxed and confident and comfortable in your body. So that's a really good way to jump in. And after that, you can go to a beach or you can go to a swim, something like that.
OK, look, Mark, really good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. We do appreciate it. And I think it's quite interesting. You see, I wonder about the house with nothing on, because there's...
I do as well.
Yeah. So there's all that
I've been doing it for a number of years, to be honest with you. I've never answered the door to anyone in that.
Oh, no.
Maybe that's the next step.
Because, but I think it's about... It's that whole thing about if you want to do it, it's fine.
Yeah.
but you don't want necessarily to subject somebody else to it, do you? That's the thing.
And I think the good thing about being at a nudist beach is because, you know, you are surrounded by like-minded people who, you know, embrace it and won't feel too uncomfortable. But I think that first time will feel quite weird if I ever do it in life.
It's amazing, isn't it, though? It does kind of depend on where you're from as well, because I do think British people are more prudish.
Yeah.
And we are reserved as a culture. I think you only need to go on holiday to France or... I was in Croatia this summer, and they've all got... And all the women just go about and it's just standard.
Dr. Mark makes a really good point there, and this is serious, very serious.
Yeah.
He said that I believe for a long time that prudish mentality has stopped men in particular.
Yes,
I agree.
To get checked out.
Yeah.
Just because we have a problem talking about that kind of thing. Do you remember back in the 80s and 90s, you had to have adverts for condoms and things like that?
Yeah.
You know, it was the problem was solved by the introduction of machines, so men could get condoms or get contraception privately without having to confront somebody at a desk. But it is that prudish mentality exists even now. It's endured even to today. It's a real problem.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Stephen, do you think we need a society where modesty is still preserved and owned?
Well, I think you've got to have a respectful society, so you respect people's point of view. It's what we're all about, isn't it? Respecting all points of view. But I think if you... Yeah, I'm all for, say, if people want to be naturists, power to your elbow. Or whatever other part of it. You know, why not? Why not? I'm very relaxed about it. I don't know if I particularly want to necessarily do it myself.
Yeah.
But I'm not dead against the idea. I'm not appalled.
We should try a GBNews one, shouldn't we?
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I'm not appalled by the idea. So I think it's... I mean, heck, we don't care about babies being... I mean, who cares when you go into sort of your friend's house and the baby's lying there all naked and all that? It's just like a thing, isn't it? It's just normal.
But as I say, you're on a beach, you're practically naked anyway.
Yeah, that's true. Like you say, Stephanie, you see a lot of it on social media now, don't you? I mean, it's already all out there, some would say.
Let's talk. A quick look at some sport, Aidan.
Yes, big boxing fight last night, big boxing match. An all-female card at the O2, 11 fights, 22 women. The main event was Savannah Marshall against Clarissa Shields. Clarissa Shields winning out that one. She went the distance. It was a unanimous decision, a comfortable win, I felt. Considering it was a 50-50 fight, I felt that it was actually a little... Not one-sided, but it was a clear win for Clarissa Shields. But as you said earlier on, it was about the momentousness of the occasion.
Yes.
It was something we hadn't seen before, 20,000 crowd. I think numbers will stand up quite good on Sky in the next few days if they announce their viewing figures. And
well, it was pay-per-view, wasn't it?
It wasn't pay-per-view.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't. But that's the next step. Can it be commercially viable enough to withstand a pay-per-view audience? Because I mean, will people actually go out of their way to pay extra to watch it? But it's about making stars of these people. You know, if they don't know who we are, we're not going to tune in for them.
Well, we've seen it worked with female football now, with the World Cup. So hopefully boxing will follow suit afterwards.
You want a situation where, and I mentioned it before, you want a situation where they're famous enough to walk down the street and people recognise them. Until that happens, people aren't going to go out of their way to tune in to watch someone fight who if they don't know who they are. Simple as that.
No, fair point.
Same as movies.
Yeah.
We go and we know the stars.
Talking about being famous, I mean, one of the most famous singers of a generation, Amy Winehouse. I can't believe it. She's been dead.
Gosh! Every time I heard an Amy song the other day, and every time I listen to her music, it still feels like she's alive.
Yeah.
And I remember the day she died. I was working at the BBC that day, and it was like, for months, people were like, Amy's gonna die. And when it did happen, it just felt very surreal. But, as to be expected with most of these stars who pass before their time, there is going to be a new TV series that's going to be coming out, an 8-part series, which has been picked up. And it's just going to be about her struggles, her drug addictions, her marriage to Blake Civil-Felder. Civil, it didn't go right. So it's just going to be focused on that. But I always feel a bit...
Yeah, is it going to be a drama? Or...
It's going to be a drama.
So there was a film. Real clips.
There was a film in 2015 which I really loved, and I kind of had more respect for that film because it was just based on archive footage. You could actually hear her.
A lot of it was unseen as well.
It had the input of her father in it. Where this one, I feel like it's going to be heavily dramatised. I don't know who's going to be playing Amy yet, but sometimes I do think these things can be quite distasteful sometimes.
It can be, but it's going to be interesting. Is it... who's behind it? Is it Mal Young?
Mal Young, and she's written, Holby City, Casualty, so she's well known, so hopefully...
Involved in Brookside?
Brooks, but yeah, I think it might. Well, I was going to say Brookside, but I don't. But I don't know if it's the same one.
But there is still such an obsession with her, isn't there, Stephanie?
Yeah.
I mean, she was an icon. Really.
I always say Amy's like the Janis Joplin of this generation. Like, just her music. I don't think I've ever heard a voice like Amy since she's gone. She was just a one-off, and then obviously her off music as well, her character, her sensitivities, her battles. Like, we won't get. Hopefully, we don't get a story like Amy again.
Because that's the tragedy of it. I mean, it's a huge talent, but an absolutely flawed character.
Yeah.
And it's so sad, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing, the other side to the stardom and musicians, what the battles they go through off stage is quite stuff that we miss. And I think that's why people like watching these documentaries, because you get to see the other side.
Because it was, those troubled relationships and those addictions that almost as famous as her music at that point. At the height of her fame, it was those two things coincided.
And a new generation will always know about Amy.
Yeah.
Someone will always find her on Spotify and discover her.
The raw talent was interesting to me when I watched the film because they showed footage of her singing when she was about 12.
Yeah.
She sounded absolutely outstanding, almost as good as she did when she was at her peak, and that really impressed me.
Absolutely incredible.
But it'll be an interesting watch. Won't it? It will be an interesting watch. So we shall see. Aidan, just quickly, key matches today that we would have.
Yeah, Liverpool, the key match, one standout game, Liverpool Manchester City, 4:30. If you're asking me for a prediction, Mystic McGee, I'm going to go for a 2-1 win for Liverpool.
Right. And it's at Anfield with a home crowd.
Home crowd, yeah. Man City haven't won in front of a crowd there since 2003.
What does it mean for the table if they win? Because I mean, there'd be 16 points back if Liverpool lost.
Lose, yeah.
If they win, where does that leave them?
That leaves them. They've cut the difference to 10, I believe, using my arithmetic. But they're more. I mean, look, they're still far off the pace. I mean, there's a lot to do. But Arsenal are the ones who'll be looking at what happens at Anfield today because they're playing at 2:00 against Leeds. Leeds not in great form. If they go there and win, that means Liverpool and City will kick off with Arsenal already 4 points clear and not able to be caught by the end of the day, so they could be top of the pile. So a huge incentive for Arsenal, not just about Liverpool and City.
Right, OK. Look, Aidan, Stephanie, thank you very much indeed. That is it from me and Ellie for today. You get a day off tomorrow?
I get a day off, you're back in.
I'm back in. Well, I'll be back in. It'll be very nice.
Yeah.
So I'll see you at 6:00 tomorrow morning. Portillo is up next.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking blustery, with showers becoming confined to the far north. Elsewhere, mostly dry. Let's take a look at the details.
Well, across the south and west, dry, plenty of sunshine this morning, although some cloud will spread across the region later.
A dry start across the south and east with plenty of sunshine. However, cloud will move across the region from the south during the morning.
Now, it's going to be a fine and dry start with a fair amount of sunshine during the morning and